What's up, brothers and sisters, truthers, Wookiees, and the donors of the tinfoil hat? Because we don't believe in magic bullets or buildings that fall like that, man. You know it's Freaky Friday, September 16th, 2016. And, man, as always, we got to give a big shout-out to all the awesome cats joining us in the chat room at truefrequencyradio.com/chat. Man, ain't got nothing but love for you guys and girls out there. And everyone else out there listening on the FM frequencies, 90.7 FM in Denver, Colorado, 97.3 in Eugene, Oregon, all around the world on the net, interdimensional cats, lizard aliens. We don't care where you come from. If you're here, you're going to get freaky with us, man. And sitting at the Woo Crew table tonight, we got the usual suspects, Kev Baker, Johnny Whistles, Joe Joseph, Scott Lopez, and I'm Kenneth Webb, a.k.a. Change the Channel. Man, and joining us tonight is our quantum brother, the CERN burn that makes your mind turn, Mr. Anthony Patch. Welcome to Freaky Friday, brother.
Woo!
Oh.
See, he's
CERN
speechless.
burn.
He's speechless.
CERN burn.
Yep.
Been
And of
burned
course-
by those lead ions.
Absolutely. And of course, Tony Patch, AnthonyPatch.com. I also want to point out, guys, that you're going to be hosting a 3-day conference, September 30th to October 2nd in Knoxville, Tennessee. Hear the Watchman Conference. If you're in that area, go check out Tony and hear what he's got to say. And also, you got a new book coming out, which is pretty cool, Revising Reality, a biblical look into the cosmos, how dramatic new discoveries in biblical text and breakthroughs in modern physics are transforming our views of the cosmos. We'll get into some of that tonight. And we'll be shamelessly plugging it all night for Tony because that's how we roll around here on Freaky Friday. Kev Baker, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm locked. I'm loaded. I'm ready to go. And, you know, it's almost like divine intervention, the fact that last night's guest came out of nowhere, Gary Wayne. He talked about the Nephilim, and towards the end of the show, without any prompting whatsoever, he set us up perfectly for tonight because he was talking about the abyss, about portals, about CERN, about quantum computers. And like I say, there was no planning in the fact that these two guests would follow each other. I can't think of two better guests to complement each other one night after the other. And talking of Gary Wayne, he is going to be on Freaky Friday 2 weeks from tonight. He needs 3 hours. He's going to go into great detail, and I can't wait for that one. But tonight's show, guys, this is going to be off the charts. And before we go anywhere, let's get Johnny Whistles. Head on over to the Batcave or the Wookiee section, tinfoil hat section, John, whatever you want to call it, because 45 people in there already.
Incredible, Kev. Again, thanks everybody for turning up in numbers. As you say, Kev, 45 in the tinfoil hat area. And let's start with our 3 in red. We've got Freeman 8, our brother Joe Joseph, and our sister Lucky. We've got Alex Mendez, Andrew Bison Giorgio. New name in there. We've got Astriana, we've got Ozzy Anzac, Bill Demarest, Calvin Long, we've got Charles Calvo, Che Sun, we've got Marilyn Monroe. Sorry, Sherilyn Monroe. We've got Chrissy Freeman, Chris Smith, Chris Steiner, Darryl Bowles, Devlin, Throne Free Zone, Emperor of Woo, the lovely Gail Wood, Jeff Phillips, we've got Gerds, we've got Ginger Duckett, we've got Ian Tinsley, James Webster, the lovely Joy Williams and Kat Landry, Kenneth Webb, who's here tonight. We've got Lichty Lass, Mark Gibbons, Michelle Smith, Moira McRae, Moofish, Nancy Lalonde, One World Human, I think that could be. We've got Regla Girl, we've got Rocket Rat, Sam Ramirez, the lovely Sarah Clough, Scotty Lopez, our brother tonight. We've got Spears Buddy, we've got Star the Oracle, Thomas Silk, Timothy Bloom, Tony Phillips, and last but not least, Kev, number 49, Tracy Whitten.
49 in the chat, Joe. Locked and loaded for tonight's show. Now, we're going to be getting into a number of topics, guys, but Anthony Patch is a world-renowned CERNologist. That's my tag for him anyway. And over the years now, we have been ahead of the curve on everything that is CERN. Now, recently, we mentioned a new experiment that was going to be firing up, the Awake experiment. Now, this soup sings up no end. We're going to start there tonight. And also, Tony's going to lay out what's going to be coming up at CERN in the next couple of months. So, Tony, we've spoke about this awake machine before, but now things are starting to get very real. The awake team, they're meeting from the 19th to the 21st of September, and they are getting ready to do their stuff. Talk to the listeners about what's going to be going on there, Tony.
And even more than that, Tony, what is awake for all our new listeners out there?
Well, we'll wake them up by just saying it's a plasma accelerator. It's a whole change from the gravity model to the electric model as far as accelerating particles. It's a 30-meter long linear or straight line particle accelerator that's being married up, conjoined up with the larger machine, the 27-kilometer main ring of the Large Hadron Collider. And it's 1,000 times more powerful than the larger machine.
Which was already pretty powerful, because over the course of time, they've stepped up the power from 14 tera electron volts. What was it, to 1.3 or 1.4 peta electron volts, which, you know, it's kind of like, how do you quantify that kind of number? You know what I mean? It's just so much. And then to go 1,000 times more than that. Oh, wow.
You can take that 1 peta electron volt, Joe. I think it's 1,000. Is it 1,000 million volts, something like that? A number you can't even picture. And they're going to times that by 20, because it's going to start hitting 20 peta electron volts. And that's when they start to factor in a whole new machine altogether, when they take this plasma accelerated electrons and start firing them into protons coming from the ring. But the best way for people out there to think of this plasma awake machine, just think of a body of water, something firing through underneath the water, creating waves on the surface. Now, on these waves, you see surfers in real life. Well, swap the surfers for electrons. Now, those protons are already souped up to high energy, firing through that plasma, and the protons on top, like Tony says, the energy is 1,000 times more efficient. And Tony, it doesn't stop there, because when they fill this with plasma and they start doing this time round, well, that's one thing. But they're already planning for something far more powerful when they start firing them and having collisions, right?
Yeah, the plan on the books is to go to a machine that's 100 times more powerful in terms of using the ring-based particle acceleration as opposed to just a linear. And so just the ring-based themselves, around 2035 is their goal, and that's always subject to change. But they'll change over from the magnets of niobium and titanium to niobium and tin, and that will raise from 8.3 Tesla, where they're now at, as far as the gravity, or I should say they rate it in Tesla as gravity, but it's really electromagnetism of 8.3. To give you some perspective, the Earth is about 0.6 Tesla. They're already operating at 8.3 Tesla. They're going to jump up to between 20 and 30 Tesla with the new machine.
Oh, man. So look, I wonder what kind of havoc that would wreak on the magnetic field of the Earth, because we already know that CERN in its present form, you know, if there's a coronal mass ejection or a solar flare on its way in, CERN has to shut down the beams because of the disruption to the magnetic field. So I wonder how much of an actual disruption it would be if it's 20 times more than that, you know?
Yeah, be significant. I mean, we've talked about how they are going to basically lower the shields, to use a Star Trek phraseology there. The magnetosphere and the magnetopause are the shields from gamma rays and X-rays and accelerated particles from the cosmos and from the sun in particular. The magnets do reach out, so to speak, and change the morphology or the shape of those shields. And they do that not just because they have magnetic lines of force. One thing that we haven't talked about really in any depth is the fact that when you accelerate particles through a magnetic field, and that magnetic field holds the particles to a curved pathway, hence the main ring of the collider. Radiating out at 90 degrees from the ring itself in all directions are what are known as synchrotron energies. Those are gamma rays and X-rays. These also impact the magnetosphere. So it is not just a matter of the magnetic lines of force generated by the magnets, but also gamma rays and X-rays that will be produced by the machine that will also affect our shields. So you have the shields, in effect, being bombarded from without and from within. And they're not going to stand up, but that's deliberate. And we can touch on why it's deliberate if you want.
And, just before that, there's so many different things going on at CERN because they've got the cloud experiment as well. And they're basically creating clouds in a chamber. And then, like Tony says there, these synchrotron energies, gamma rays and X-rays, what they do is they filter them off through a beam. They come into the cloud and they're basically mapping and simulating what cosmic energy does to chemtrails, in my opinion. But Tony, I'll get you to add on to that because that's where they use some of these energies that they produce, right?
Yeah, it does tie into the chemtrails. They want to make sure that they are saturating the atmosphere with enough of their aluminum particles in particular, but also there's barium and strontium and lithium and another host of particles and elements that they're putting into the atmosphere. The big part of that is, Project Bluebeam, but the even bigger part of that is that they are trying to terraform the planet, and they're trying to change the atmosphere.
And this all ties back into last night's guest, Tony, because he was talking about the Nephilim and how basically their energies, their spirits, they're captured right now in the abyss. And when we're talking about geoengineering the planet and things like that, it's for these very entities, I imagine, one day, very soon, coming back and roaming around here. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I do. It's for a new race of beings. That's the whole purpose of this. It's not just for the Nephilim, be they, normal size, 6 foot or 8 foot, whatever, but also for the hybrid race that they're creating, the transhumanist movement and all of that. So we have a mixture of the Nephilim returning as well as human beings, whoever's going to be left here, being changed radically as well. So we have a lot going on. One of the other aspects to changing the shields, the shape or the integrity of the shields is to, as we have, discussed many times, is reaching out to Saturn electrically with the Large Hadron Collider, the reconnecting of the two planets. In fact, it's kind of a misnomer to say reconnecting. It's an enhancement of the existing electrical connection between all the planets and the Earth and the Sun. They are enhancing that electrical connection between Saturn and the Earth with the LHC. That's one of the multi-layered agenda items that they're working with. They'll produce toroidal fields and torsion fields with this machine in the production and transmission of Birkeland currents to the southern pole of Saturn. And if you want to get ready for that black cube discussion, you can fit it in here or we can do it later.
I've got it right here. And we often talk about the black cube of Saturn. And I know some people out there think it's a bit metaphysical, bit out there, doesn't really hold much relevance. Well, I want you to listen to this next clip. It's just a couple of minutes long and see what you make of this.
Well, thank you, guys. I'll just address Doug Hagman as Mr. Hagman to keep it clear. You remember you and I had a conversation, I think you reiterated in our last show, where you had said in a previous show concerning Saturn and the cube residing within it, the black cube of Saturn. And you disclosed to me that you had been in contact with an intelligence agency source who said to you, Doug, in relation to this cube, Doug, you don't know what you're talking about. And you had said, you're right, I don't know what I'm talking about. And his response to that was that everyone at the highest levels in the intelligence communities knows all about the black cube of Saturn and what it means. Now, I'm paraphrasing your words. Do you want to real quickly just kind of throw a comment back to me?
Well, yeah, and this was a discussion with somebody within one of the 3-letter agencies, and we were talking about just the Luciferian agenda in general, okay, as it applies or in the context of current events. And somehow, I don't know where we took a left turn into the conversation, and we started talking about just about the space and the planets, okay. And I said, it seems to me that like there's a lot of emphasis placed on certain planets over others, but in particular Saturn. And I heard something about Saturn, and I did mention the cube as you referenced, but I went on kind of a different tangent, and that's when he stopped me and says, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. And I said, yeah, you're exactly right. I don't know. I mean, because I was taken aback by any emphasis whatsoever by anyone in the intelligence venues, any one of them, talking about planets, for crying out loud, as some sort of an indicator or have any relevance to an agenda out there. I guess you get the feeling or get the idea on that.
So there you go, guys. I mean, it's not just us in the alternative media and on the woo-woo shows talking about black cubes. This really is highly relevant. Look at Mecca, the big black cobblestone over there. Big black cube. Tony, this thing definitely is very, very relevant to those who have this knowledge.
It is, and it's their worship of Saturn as the primordial sun. And this goes back to their belief in the mythos of the golden age of Kronos, in which Mars, Earth, and Saturn were conjoined within a plasma envelope and traveled through the cosmos together, and then were entrained by the electromagnetic attraction, not a gravity attraction, of the sun on Saturn, Earth, and Mars, and bringing them into close proximity of Earth itself. And this is reflected, as we often cite, in the research done by the scientists at the Thunderbolts Project. So people can go and look at that for more information. But in a nutshell, the reason they worship Saturn and the cube in particular is because they believe that that is where man started, where man lived in a previous Garden of Eden sort of environment, if you will, the golden age of Kronos being Saturn. So they are trying to recreate this golden age through all of this technology that we've been talking about for years now, in particular the Large Hadron Collider, otherwise known as the Very High Energy Electron-Proton Collider. That's what it's known in the physics community as. It's not really referred to as the LHC anymore, but I'll let you jump in there.
Well, I'm going to bring Joe in here at this point because, Joe, we're talking about this golden age. Yeah. And the more I'm starting to look into all of this, I mean, I thought Adam and Eve, that was the start of all of it. But I'm starting to appreciate now there was a whole heck lot more going on way before that, maybe 2-3 times. Who knows how many kind of startups we've had, Joe, but I'd like you to talk to that because you know more about that.
Well, it's interesting because, we have the watered down version. Of course, I look at the Bible as one of many different sources. And your guest last night, man, I look forward to him coming on in 2 weeks. That's wonderful. If you look at the historical record across the world, and we'll just use Noah for an example, because the story of Noah is a common theme throughout all of the history of all of these ancient civilizations. Whether you go to South America, you hear Noah. It's by a different name, but it's Noah. You go over to China, it's Noah, and it's the same thing. If you look in the Sumerian kings list and everything else, there's, all of this stuff is all talked about. And so you wonder, well, how did that happen? How could that be?
Well, Joe, even last night, to add to that, during the break, we were talking to the guest, and he was telling us that Noah even turns up in the Quran.
Absolutely. And you have to read everything in its totality. It takes a lot of time, and that's one of the things that I've done, is I don't the Bible's a historical document, and that's great, but it's so much more than that. To me, it's a communication medium. It really is. if you know how to use it, what happens is it ends up talking to you. That's the way God speaks to you. If you really connect with that book, it'll actually start talking to you and guiding you places. It's not, I don't believe it's meant to be read from cover to cover. I don't think it is. It's more of a communication medium. But when you start to look at all of the history, the real history that went on pre-Diluvian, I mean, good grief. You're talking about a total different atmosphere. You're talking about, you know, guys like the horsetail, right? You know, the plant, the horsetail, looks like I don't know, it's probably like 3 or 4 feet tall, maybe up to 6 feet tall, or even a cattail. You've seen them before. Well, pre-Diluvian, those things, the stalks on them were the size of tree trunks. Trees were, we're talking a mile high. You had giants that roamed the earth that were over 500 feet tall. And then you wonder, we often see, the footsteps of the dinosaurs and everything else. Like, for example, Brontosaurus. Brontosaurus couldn't live today in our atmosphere. Couldn't do it because he had the nostrils the size of a horse. The concentration of oxygen and the atmospheric pressure was different pre-flood. It was an entirely different world. It was like Jurassic Park on steroids, and everything was a lot bigger. Everything lived a lot longer. And then you take a look at stuff like Adam and Eve. You talked about Adam and Eve, The story of Adam and Eve, if you just go by the biblical account, is very, very condensed and vague. But you go with the oral record. What was the oral record? The book of Adam and Eve. Oh, man. You want to talk about, just think about this, Kev. Let me just put it in perspective. Here you are. You're in a garden. And you're walking with God. And God made man in his own image, right? Which and to me that means that we were more of like an interdimensional, we had interdimensional capability, meaning that we could traverse, whereas, and then they screwed up and they lost that ability. Well, in the book of Adam and Eve, they can't live with themselves. It was unbelievable torment for them to be put in these flesh suits and then having to go through everything that they did. They committed suicide like half a dozen times. God had to bring them back. It's like, they jumped off the mountain again.
Joe, that knowledge that they took, say it came from Lucifer and then it was rife with these Nephilim as well.
Yeah.
The flood eventually came along, meant to wipe it out, but it didn't get rid of it. It didn't. No. And here we are today. And that's how it all connects to what we're talking about tonight, folks. Because that age, those beings, those fallen angels, all of that stuff, this is where we're now returning to. Right. And the priesthood at CERN, as Tony calls them, I mean, they are using this Nephilimic knowledge, I made up that word there, Joe, to basically bring about their return. It sounds dramatic, but that is exactly what they're trying to do.
That's exactly what
bidding for these people.
That's exactly what they're doing. And a lot of people say, well, the Bible's a cruel book. It's a bloody book. Well, it is a bloody book at times. But you have to understand why it is. You have to understand it in context. And I know that's kind of a weird word for people that haven't embarked upon a field of study into it. But the ites of the Bible, especially in that time, like in the days of Jacob, the ites were the Nephilim, the giants, the leftovers. And, after the flood, they were still around. So God told Jacob, hey, you need to go and slay, like the Amorites. Go slay them. The Amorites were like vampires. They were like vampire-like beings, if you could imagine. And they were giants. And they were just eating up everything. And so, yeah, God said, look, we got to get rid of these things because I didn't create that. That's a product of the Nephilim, of the fallen ones, No. We can't have that. So, a lot of people say, wow, where he says, kill every man, every woman, every children, all the children, the donkeys, everything. Just lay waste to everything because you have to. Because if you don't, what happened before is going to happen again. And So they went and they did it, but good grief, I'll tell you what, we are fast approaching that again, if not already there. So, boy,
the thing is, Joe, those energies, those demons that were left after the Nephilim, they were locked away in arguably a cube. And that cube lies in a dimension that we are going to talk about after the break. How they're basically searching for that dimension, searching for the key that will open the abyss. Oh, told you last night's show was a perfect setup for this one. But remember, folks, check out Anthony Patch's new work. He co-authored a book along with 3 other authors, and it's called Revising Reality. You can find that over at anthonypatch.com. Go grab a drink. There's a lot of wows and people amazed in the chat room. We've hardly even got going yet, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
Hey everybody, it's Freaky Friday here on Your Protection from Deception. Frequency Radio. TruthFrequencyRadio.com. Thank you, Mr. Wookie. We're joined by Anthony Patch. That's right, AnthonyPatch.com. And folks, I cannot tell you enough. If you are in Tennessee at September 30th to October 2nd, then you can catch Anthony at the Hear the Watchman conference right in Knoxville. So make sure you go there and, of course, check out his new book, Revising Reality, a biblical look into the cosmos, how dramatic new discoveries in biblical texts and breakthroughs in modern physics are transforming our views of the cosmos. So where do we go from here, Uncle Kev?
Well, 2 seconds, because I think it might be important for us to share what Ken asked Tony during the break, because I can imagine a lot of the listeners out there have heard a lot about CERN, but how do we actually visualize how powerful a machine this is? Is there any point of reference? So, Ken, if you just even ask Tony what you asked him before, because I think this sums it up, and then we can get into the whole interdimensionality of things.
Yeah, it just blew my mind, because I'm sitting here. It sounds like a lot of energy is going in CERN. You know, when you talk about it and how they're amping it up and everything, and I'm sitting there going like some kind of visual deal. You know, so how for a layman that doesn't really understand these types of things, or how much energy is being used, to give a visual for the listeners out there.
Okay. Well, very shortly, and then I'll go into a little more detail. This is rendering nuclear warheads to the level of firecrackers. This is a weapons program. This is the stuff that destroys planets. Star Wars Death Star, if you will. This is a both kinetic energy weapon and also a directed energy weapon to be applied as a weapon. Not initially, but it is. And part of that weapons technology is to be directed at the quantum level to open a portal. But to give you some context, something you can put your head around, the energy actually is a definition of what's called the center of mass of particles. When you accelerate particles to near the speed of light, you're actually increasing their mass. And the reason they can't accelerate past the speed of light is because then they would spontaneously convert to energy. So you bring these particles up to near the speed of light, you increase their energy and their mass as you do that, to the point where these billions and billions of particles, I sound like Carl Sagan, but billions of particles essentially are forming up into a solid stream. In fact, 2 streams that are moving in opposite directions around the ring and moving at near the speed of light. And then they are allowed to collide. And that's when we get this 20 peta-electron volts of energy that are released. Now, many detractors will say, well, you know, electron volts, they want to compare to the beating of mosquito wings and things like that at much lower levels. What they're missing the point here is we are talking about billions and billions of particles colliding, hundreds and hundreds of thousands, even into the millions. And at this point of 20 electron volts, peta-electron volts, we're talking about billions of collisions per second, billions of particles per second colliding. The multiplication factor is what I want to stress here. You may have 20 peta-electron volts in one particle and may not amount to much. But if you multiply that by factors of billions, now the energy that's being released is significant. And that also is affecting the planet when they do that. And when they do this, it will be used at a directed point in the north field within the center point of the ring. And that will be the power level that will be used in their parlance to break through the Higgs field. Now, that's only a theoretical field. What they're really doing is breaking the bonds, the nuclear bonds that hold gluons. That's the force to hold quarks together in the strangelets. Again, it's hard to wrap our heads around because we've not actually experienced 20 peta-electron volts being concentrated in one spot before. And that's the point. The point being that's the level of energy it takes to break through the barrier into one or more dimensions. And we're going to get into that in just a second. But just realize that this machine is more powerful than any hydrogen bomb that has ever been released on this planet.
And that's before we even get into the strangelet production. But, you know, for people out there, if you picture two particle cannons just facing each other, and then you can think of both of them firing, one collision. Only thing is, they're firing that often that it's like two, like Tony says, solid streams. When it's lead on lead, think of two pencil leads just driving into each other, constantly releasing that energy.
Yeah, it's hard to do the math. I mean, you'd have to sit down with a calculator and know exactly how many particles are actually going to be collided. But they don't even know at this point. This is the realm. Once we get into 1 peta-electron volts, as they spiked back in October, as we talked about, they, by their own admission from CERN, say this is all new physics. We don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know the characteristics of what is going to happen when the energy is released. But they press on forward, just like at the time of Oppenheimer with the first detonation at Trinity of the first nuclear warhead. They thought it might ignite the universe or ignite the atmosphere. And what ended up happening, it was actually sucking in energy from the plasma that surrounds all of us. And the yield from that first test was far greater than they ever expected from just the simple chain reaction of fissile material.
And just to even build on that, because this new machine, the very high energy electron proton collider that we've been talking about, in a paper from Max Planck Institute, they were talking about the fact that they are going to be looking at nonsensical physics. It's going to be so far beyond that standard model, Tony. They're peering into the realms of the unknown.
They really are. And this is where we get into talking about dimensions. We get into talking about string theory. If you're going to be talking about opening a portal, well, how many dimensions are we going to be accessing? And it relates over to D-Wave and our conversations about what Geordie Rose has said about accessing parallel dimensions. And we'll throw some numbers around. So if people want to get a notepad out, there's some numbers we're going to be tossing around here in a little bit.
Unbelievable. So,
Joe, just get this, though. This is the level of thinking that they think the general public, this is what they throw at the general public out of CERN, okay? Because they say here, scientists are searching for the proof of the baffling brain theory, which says a series of two-dimensional universes may be only microscopic distances from ours, and they may be contactable or even act as doorways from one to the other. They're basically saying that CERN right now is on the verge of proving the existence of the fourth and fifth dimension. But we've already heard Geordie Rose talking about 2 to the power of 500 dimensions every time a qubit fires up. So this is the level that they want Joe Blogs to be thinking at. Again,
Exactly.
hiding the truth.
Yeah, keep everybody at base level thinking, but really in reality, and Geordie Rose, of course, the guy behind the
D-Wave.
the D-Wave, the
money behind
adiabatic
it.
quantum computer, right? So here you have a quantum computer that is tunneling, if I remember right, through to different dimensions, and as he says himself, they're getting data back from that. They're using the resources is the politically correct term, but they're basically getting instructions. If you ask me, that seems to be what's happening, And once you open a door, you got to remember that time is a construct that we're trapped in. But when you open this door, that door is always open. It never really closes. Maybe to us it will, but once it's open, it's always open. And we're making Swiss cheese out of the veil, if you ask me. I don't know. That just seems to be what's going on. But there's going to be this dimension, or this, like you guys said, the cube, the prison, the bottomless pit, that they're going to open, that they're trying to open. And when they do, it's going to be hell on earth. I think the Bible says that. Oh, go ahead, Tony.
No, go ahead.
The Bible says that in those days, it will be unlike any time ever on the face of the earth. That includes the flood. That includes, Nephilim running around and killing each other. That's crazy when you think about it. And it's going to be so bad that men's hearts will fail them out of fear. I mean, just keep that in perspective. And if you can't see this darkness that's enveloping the planet, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It is dark, and it's getting darker. Isn't that right, Tony? Except at CERN.
And
a lot of luminosity at CERN.
a lot of luminosity. Yeah, very well done. No, you're right. You're right. People often ask me, what's the relevancy to my day-to-day walk in life? And I say, how do you think your life would change if a portal was opened and demonic entities came through and completely changed this planet? Don't you think that would kind of ruin your day?
I would have to say that it would ruin my day. Yeah, a little bit. I don't know, because I've been expecting it. So I'd be like, there you are. Yeah, that's great.
The entire world is distracted by, take your pick, wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes and volcanoes in diverse places. I'm quoting from scripture. We've got the elections in this country. I mean, you pick your topic, it's all a distraction, because the average person, I even tested this a couple of days ago. I asked a friend of mine's wife, I said, have you ever heard of CERN? No. Do you know what a particle collider is? No. So this is what we're speaking to, is that people have been so distracted from seeing the largest, most complex, most powerful machine that's been created in recorded modern history, and barely anybody even knows that it exists.
Because it's not like a cute, cuddly kitten, Tony. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a
can't put it on Facebook as a cuddly kitten. You're right. No, and so people will also say, well, this is high technology, maybe we don't understand it, but, it's all in the hands of good people, all in the hands of the scientists. And as you said, I call it the priesthood. But what, we've dug into quite a bit, and we're going to touch on that again tonight, is the nefarious dark side, as you said, the evil that's come upon the world. They are communicating with the other side, just as through all the historical secret societies have communed with the other side for information, power, and technology. And your guest said it very well last night, in which he was talking about the 70 years, or I should say the 70 generations is more accurate, that would play out. And in the end of the 70th generation, the watchers, the fallen angels, will then partake and pass on hidden, forbidden knowledge that we're not supposed to have, to mankind in the early 20th century. And now, if you look back historically, you can see the advancement of technology just in the last 150 years. And therefore, that speaks to this communication that's taken place with the other side. Werner von Braun, let's call him the father of, the space program, who was a Nazi rocket scientist, brought over Operation Paperclip, head of NASA. He said towards the end of his life that we got all of our information from the other side. And we can cite many other people through, scientific history who said the same thing, underscoring, and I'll get off my soapbox, the fact that what is driving CERN and the mainstream science in general is the dark side. And people need to be aware of that and take it literally and take it seriously.
You're bang on, Tony, because this knowledge, it does hold great power, great advances in medical technology, stuff like that. But it is the dark side of it. And von Braun there, during his time with the Nazis, they were using the Thule Society, who were channeling things from this other realm. And I call them things for a reason, because how can you describe them any other way? But fast forward to today, and we've got Geordie Rose, the money man behind D-Wave, and Easy Eric, as I call him. I can never remember.
Did you just call him Easy Eric?
Easy Eric, the actual brains behind the D-Wave. They literally now, they don't need to channel because they stand at the altar to the alien god. Not my words.
Yes, they're obelisk.
Yeah. Why would a scientist, why would a money man talk about the pulse dilution refrigerators that supercool this cube enclosed? Okay, here's the cube again. Cube enclosed quantum computer, in which he says it sounds eerily like a heartbeat, and then follows that very quickly with, it feels like an altar to an alien god.
Yeah.
Now, who talks about alien gods in the world of supercomputing? I don't see anybody at Cornell or NYU talking about alien gods. So these guys don't care anymore about hiding, occulting what they're doing. They're openly talking about accessing parallel universes. And this is where we'll kind of get into some of the numbers. Geordie Rose said that the Model 512, which is now several years old, the Model 512, he said they're accessing 2 to the 500th power of parallel universes through that chip. That's the quantum tunneling access that you were talking about, Joe. Now, I think he was a little misleading in his mathematics, because I've really taken a hard look at the numbers and really what he should have been saying. Let me grab my notes here real quick.
2 seconds, Tony. I've actually got it here, I think. Is it the power of 2 table you're after?
Yeah, I got it right here. Go ahead, throw it out there.
No, you've got it there. I'll throw it into the chat room. But basically, Geordie Rose was lying. We think he was lying, don't we, Tony? Because he was saying 2 to the power of 500. But when I share this in the chat room, we think it may be 2 to the power of 9, 2 to the power of 10. There you go.
Yep, the power of 2 to the 9th power. And the reason I do that is, I look at the mathematics that are involved, and part of that is to look at the power of the multiplication table, the power of 2s. So what I'm going to illustrate for you here are the powers of 2 and the corresponding number that equals. And those corresponding numbers equal and identify the exact model numbers of the computers historically in progression built by D-Wave Corporation. And that's why I'm saying that he was deliberately misleading people when he was citing 2 to the 500th power for the Model 512. He should have been citing 2 to the 9th power. That equals 512. So starting at the beginning, 2 to the 7th power equals 128. That was the first publicly released machine for purchase by D-Wave. 2 to the 8th power is 256, but that was never released. 2 to the 9th, as I said, is the Model 512. 2 to the 10th is 1024. That was released in February of last year. Unreleased numbers are what I'm going to give you next. 2 to the 11th power is 2048. 2 to the 12th power is 4096. And 4096 is what we're going to focus on this evening as the number. These are 2 to the 12th parallel dimensions that they're accessing with the model 4096. 4096 is the number of qubits that are used as processors within this adiabatic quantum computer. Go ahead.
And that's every time they fire up any D-Wave, they're accessing those number of parallel dimensions. Now, Tony, that 4096, that's never, ever been publicly released. And I believe even when they were using the 2048, even then they were only using half of these qubits, right?
That's correct. When they made the public announcement last year, February of last year, the Model 1024, for the purposes of talking to their peers in the papers that I read, they said they were only using half of the number of chips on the 2048 chip in order to run a 1024 computer. So they've sort of released the number 2048, but they really haven't. And the next advancement is the 4096. I know that they've built the 4096 because by their own admission, they moved away from Moore's law when they first started of doubling the number of transistors on a chip every 18 months to what they called Rose's law from Gordy Rose. Rose's law is that the number of qubits, not transistors, but qubits, doubles every 12 months. Now they just said a few months ago, they're admitting the number of qubits is doubling every 3 months. So I may actually be behind the curve on what they have built when I say they've built a 4096.
And Tony, that 4096, that is a very, very relevant number for a number of reasons. And this is where everyone listening tonight, all you hardcore Wookiees, forget Freaky Friday. We're going Frequency Friday. Because this is, and I was going to say it's key, Tony, it's literally the key, right?
This is literally the key to the bottomless pit spoken of in Revelation 9. I've spoken to a number of people very knowledgeable in Bible history, the interpretation of the Bible, theology in general. And from my sources that I've spoken with, the Bible does not specifically define what the key is, whether it's a physical object or something else. What I'm proposing is that 4096 is actually a key that is used in coding information, a cryptological key. You use a key, and that's what it's called in cryptology, in coding communications. Use a key to produce the coded information, to encode it, encrypt it as it's called, and then to decrypt it, you need the same key to decipher it. The key from the bottomless pit, in my estimation, is the mathematical algorithm 4096. Now that moves from 2048, which was Peter Shor's algorithm, which required a quantum computer to break that code. It is called RSA coding. They use 2048. They use that algorithm of prime factors to create a key. 4096 is a more complex algorithm and has more prime factors in it, and likewise requires a quantum computer to crack that code and do the encoding and decoding. Decoding is what the key process is. It's a process of cracking a code that produces and releases information that is forbidden, that is hidden. And that information is exact instructions on how to open the abyss. And I'll let you guys jump in before I go on and describe more of what that is.
Well, this whole 4096 as well, Tony, it's very relevant because I believe it's your friend Chris. She was looking into the fact that in gematria and other texts that she was looking through, this number refers to Saturn, Jupiter, Venus as well. And it's almost like a code that exists in this reality, this dimension, in this solar system, right?
It is. It's a code that's represented in a number of venues. We just went through the mathematical progression of the power of 2. What I'm going to offer to you now is another reference to 4096, and that comes from frequencies, from resonance frequencies, from mathematical octaves. There are 9 octaves that when you raise each octave to the 9th level, there's a mathematical progression. And I'll start at the beginning. 8 cycles per second is the Schumann resonance of the planet. It's basically what we, resonate at. You go from 8 to 32 to 64 to 128 to 256 to 512 to 1024 to 2048 to 4096. And 4096, when you look at things such as crystallography, you look at the frequency at which crystals resonate. A crystal that resonates at a frequency of 4096 is described as the crystal that opens doorways to angelic horizons.
And Tony is not making that up, folks. I'm going to drop that link in the chat room for all of you. And this 4096, be it the D-Wave, be it all the different stuff, it means it's all connected. And this literally is the key that they are going to try and use to open the bottomless pit. Remember seeing them all at CERN standing in the control room with the massive key? Remember all the times they've been talking about checking out for other dimensions, peering in there, going in, taking stuff out.
Not to mention the rituals, Kev, all the rituals that are performed there all the time. It's very interesting how all this is kind of coming together.
That's what Ken was saying in the chat. I mean, that in itself, that is very telling about that place, right? I mean, why is a science institute facility carrying out things like the symmetry dance? What's going on there? And I mean, it's all worthy of further research. And then you find out all of this stuff and it starts to make a lot more sense.
Do I have time before the break for a couple of more numbers?
That would be a negative because we have a break.
And when we come back, frequency of the break, Joe.
Yes, we'll have more with Anthony Patch. AnthonyPatch.com is his website. Check out his new book, and we'll be back for hour number 2.
You're now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR.
Truth frequency.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're tuned into hour number 2 of Frequency Friday right here on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. Tonight, our very special guest is our quantum brother, Anthony Patch. Now, you can find his work over at anthonypatch.com, and he's just released a new book, Revising Reality. Go and check that out. Don't forget, coming right up after this show is Chris and Cherie Geo, and they will take you beyond the veil for 3 hours straight after Freaky Friday. Now think of this planet, folks. There are 7 billion of us, probably more by now, wandering around. And those 7 billion brains, if we could hook them all up together and combine that processing power, we would still be struggling to take on just one D-Wave. It has the computing power of 7 billion minds and then some. Because, as we keep saying, it basically is the altar to the alien god in another realm. Now, we've been getting into the key to open up the abyss, this other realm where the Nephilim, demons, whatever you want to call them, lie in wait. And Tony was going through the progression of the D-Wave model numbers. Scotty Lopez during the break, absolutely spot on. If you look at the numbers involved here, it's all the different numbers, even back in classical computing, 8-bit, 16-bit, 32, 64, you start to recognize these numbers. And for me, that shows the people with this occulted knowledge have always known where they are going in the realms of computing. It's always been aimed and geared towards this very purpose. And Tony, we're going to be getting into a few more of the numbers here, and people maybe still hanging with us because we've got an intelligent lot tuning to Truth Frequency Radio. But let's get back into it, brother, because this really is key. And it's there's that word again, the key.
It is the key within the planet Saturn. to gain access to this cube, which contains knowledge that's forbidden, and also entities that are fallen angels, titans, if you will, in order to unlock that cube, utilizing these Birkeland currents that will be produced from CERN to the southern pole of Saturn, they need to have the mathematical formula, if you will. They need to be able to break the secret code that locks that cube, and that code requires a key to decipher it, and that is the algorithm 4096. Now, I mentioned frequency, and the progression of the model numbers are moving in lockstep with the progression of frequencies as far as octaves are concerned. And we know about music and the mystical aspects of music and what's happened with the music industry itself. But if we go back to the cycles per second, or the frequency of 8 at the start of the octaves, the 9 octaves, that's the Earth's frequency. It's its natural Schumann resonance, as I said. Our own frequency of our body, and I don't mean to sound like I'm a new ager, but we're talking physics here. We, as a human body, resonate or vibrate at 512 hertz. Now, that's the same model number as the D2 adiabatic quantum computer that was sold to Google, to NSA, to Lockheed Martin, to University of Southern California, to Ames Research Laboratory of NASA. These guys all own the 512, as well as the NSA in Utah at their data processing center in Utah. They have a model 512. They call it Vesuvius. So 512 is significant for a lot of reasons. It's not by chance that they put 512 qubits in their computer. It all ties into all these things that we're talking about here. Now, if you happen to multiply 512 by our Earth's frequency of 8 times 512 is 4096. 4096 in the octave range is a high note C, but that's also what a quartz crystal, specific quartz crystal, will also resonate at 4096. This also ties to what is known as the cosmic background radiation of the universe, otherwise known as the frequency of the universe, which is 4096. This is what the microwave energy is resonating at. I'm going to let you jump in here before I get into some more weeds here.
Oh, no, I don't know where you want me to take this one, Tony, because this is where I was absolutely blown away in the email that you were sending me. But one thing I can add in here, folks, is if we look at the Great Pyramid. Now, there's somebody called Christopher Dunn who looks at the Great Pyramid as basically being some kind of machine. Now, these shafts, these strange shafts that basically lead to nowhere, dead small shafts, they say that they're for looking out onto stars. But when you look at the measurement of these actual shafts, they are perfect for capturing microwave energy coming from the cosmos. Now, this microwave energy was obviously something back in those times that they were aware about, something they were using. And that, for me, makes what Tony's saying here today all the more relevant. Now, I know I kind of took it on a segue there, Tony, but these frequencies, take us back into that.
Yeah, it's very relevant to what his research was with the pyramids, because I believe that part of the function of the pyramids was not only for generating electricity, as he outlined in that video you sent to me, the piezoelectric production of energy using sound or vibration to then transmute into electricity. The pyramids clearly were being used as generators for electricity in Egypt. But let's go back just a moment, because when we look at the number 4096, if you use the factor of 2, as we were talking about before, the natural progression, 2 times 4096, if you break down the sum of that, its decimal approximation is 1.044. It's also comprised of 1,234, 1, 2, 3, 4 decimal digits in the number itself. It's such a long number. That's why I'm not trying to read it off to you, but its decimal shorthand is 1.044. Now, the cosmic background radiation, the microwave radiation of the universe, its wavelength is almost the same as the doubling of 4096. The wavelength of cosmic background radiation, the microwave radiation, is 1.063. And the decimal approximation of doubling of the 4096 is 1.044. So we have almost a one-to-one match. What I'm getting at here is this is the wavelength that is necessary for opening the portal. This is the key. You not only are opening the cube in Saturn using a cryptological key to decipher the code to get the information out of that cube to open the abyss, but you also have the physics that are involved, which is the wavelength of the frequency of the signal that will be broadcast from the Earth to Saturn to unlock that cube and then unlock the doorway to the abyss. What's the purpose of opening the abyss? That's Lucifer's agenda. He believes he can kill God. So I'm going to stop there before we get too deep in that one.
And it's not even just this wavelength, folks, because we have to factor in what we've been talking about with CERN and these huge astronomical powers that it's given off. Because when we're talking about that 20 peta-electron volts, when they eventually start to fire up the very high energy electron-proton collider, that is the energy required to push that wavelength through. Is that right, Tony?
Yeah, you picked up on it exactly. And I always appreciate it because you're always lockstep with me on this, and this is great. So we've got kind of a little formula for folks to write down, and it's very simple. It's E plus WL, energy plus wavelength, equals P for portal. So if Einstein gets to do his E equals MC squared, I guess we get to do E plus WL equals P. Because
Tony, do you think if they actually get to the abyss, we'll be given the Nobel Prize?
You know,
the only prize I want is heaven.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. This sounds eerily similar to that of the Tower of Babel. And, you know, anybody that wants to know, well, come on, that couldn't have existed. Well, you can still find it today. You know, the actual foundation stones of it are still in place. It's called the Ziggurat of Eridu. And you can go look at it on Google Earth. You can go visit it if you want. But that's exactly what the purpose of the Tower of Babel was, for Nimrod to take his army out and to go kill God. That's what they wanted to do. You know, and so everybody, you know, you wonder why all these stories seem to be the same throughout the entire, over the globe, all these different variations of the same story. But, you know, God said, boy, if we don't scatter the language, there's nothing that these humans are going to be capable of. So we got to stop this. We got to break them up. That they won't be capable of. So he did. And scattered the languages, you know, 70 languages. So, guys, I mean, this is something that happened before, and it's happening again.
Joe, I don't read the Bible much, so I'm sorry if I get this wrong, but I think Jesus or somebody says that in God's house there are many rooms, or in his mansion there are many rooms. And if you think of that, if you think of every single room out there has been a different dimension, some small, some big, but every single one of them are going to have a unique identifier. Well, what we're talking about tonight, they have located that very room number, that key that they need to get to that particular dimension. Because there's so many of them, they've actually located it, singled it down, and now when they work out the energy, they've got the wavelength, bada bing, bada boom.
That's right.
Well, go ahead, Tony.
Now, let's go back to Gordy Rose and his misnomer, his misleading of saying 2 to the 500th power of parallel dimensions. Well, it's kind of interesting because if you go to string theory, which is also called M theory. String theory is supposing that there are 10 to the 500th power. And I'm going to let you guys talk so I can mute this. I'm sorry, my phone's ringing.
Yeah,
That's no problem. On you go then, Joe. Did I butcher the Bible there, dude?
No, well, I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, the more that I think about it, the more that it seems relevant that they're going to open a door, that they're not supposed to, or that they want to, but
well, even the iPhone, their new advert for the iPhone 7, Tony's broke that down, and even in that advert, they're showing portals opening. We go to that tunnel that opened near CERN. Again, we see this portal symbology, and we talk about the whole tulpamancing and the fact that they try and show us things beforehand. They really are putting out there what we're talking about. It's all about opening that portal.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm back with you guys.
Okay.
There we go, Tony.
Well, continue, Tony.
Taking us into the M theory.
Yeah, I think what Gordy Rose was trying to refer to was that he believes in string theory, or was trying to reinforce in mainstream science the paradigm, the dogma that they adhere to is string theory. And you're right. You're talking about the many mansions. You're talking about, the many rooms. And that's one of the analogies that's used, saying that there are 10 to the 500th power of these rooms or parallel dimensions. And some people describe them as bubbles. So it really doesn't matter because it's theoretical. It's never been experimentally measured and reproduced. So again, like dark matter, dark energy, black holes, all of these things that science wants to mislead the public and keep them, hidden away from the true knowledge of the science that they're employing. I think that Gordy Rose was misleading people by trying to say that he believes in the string theory, and he knows full well that string theory is just a theory and nothing more than that. And so he throws a number out to reinforce that. You got to understand the mindset in the scientific community that if you step outside the paradigm of string theory, you could lose your career. So that's part of what the interplay that's going on behind the scenes that I just wanted to share with people.
And Alex in the chat room, Joe, he's saying, could this universe, this parallel dimension, I believe, saying, be one of these rooms? And if we think of multi-dimensional reality as being different rooms in a hotel, then this is one room amongst any, Joe, right?
No, absolutely. It most certainly isn't like as far as we know, you know what I mean? The thing is that it's all theoretical. And Tony, you made a great point in that science isn't really science anymore. It's dogma is what it is. It much like organized religion. You have them both. They both kind of butt heads, but that was never really the intention. Science and spirituality or religion actually complement one another if it's done right. But that's not what happens. Instead, they're pitted against one another. And then you have competing dogmas or competing doctrines of men. On one side, you got science. On the other side, you got religion. And they're all doing the same thing. It's all used for control. Just like you have creationism versus evolutionism, But it's all the creation of men. These variations of it. And it's all to control. So once you break free of that and you start doing the research into the history, into these ancient texts, into the real science of it, you find that each one proves each other. In the case of quantum physics, it has done nothing but validate that the universe is ordered and that actually we live in, I guess for lack of a better term, a construct, like a pixelated construct, if you will. So it boggles my mind that so many people get wrapped up in the illusion that they conflict with one another when in reality one proves the other. Just very interesting.
They do. And what we're presenting here focusing on the number 4096, but then looking at different crossovers or different areas of confirmation of that number being significant. And my thought at this point regarding that is that 4096 is a microwave frequency, and the specific frequency is 73 hertz. And I gave you the wavelength of the background microwave energy of the cosmos being measured at 1.063 millimeters. So they understand the frequency that they need to match up and the wavelength that they need to match up and the power that's necessary to match up. So they're coalescing everything. They're bringing the computers in alignment with these frequencies and wavelengths so that the computer matches what needs to be done from a power standpoint at CERN. And that's why I have said many times to you guys, the D-Wave computer is the computer that is responsible for opening this freeway portal, as I call it, this macro scale portal. It'll start at the quantum, but it will expand. And the rate of expansion and the degree of expansion has to be carefully controlled. And it is only this computer system, the 4096, that is in harmonic resonance computationally and through quantum tunneling and through already accessing other dimensions, parallel dimensions, that it has that ability to control this portal's opening. Otherwise, as Stephen Hawking said, at the speed of light, this portal could envelop not only the Earth, but the entire universe at the speed of light in a vacuum bubble. And it is this adiabatic quantum computer that will prevent that. CERN, according to Revelation 9, will be successful in opening this portal.
I have to agree with you. And, you talked about the 70th generation and the fact that we're in it now. Mm-hmm. Not to deviate too much off the subject, but, another interesting prophecy that kind of goes in parallel with this is the prophecy of the popes. And we're on the last one, too. At that point in time, you got all of these just little tidbits of information, and they're all converging at the same point.
Yes, they are.
At this point in time, and that's why it's so important. I've had a lot of revelation here lately, at least personally, and I can't stress enough how important it is to find not only your faith, but understand what it means to let things go when you can't handle them, when you feel like you can't handle things, or you're not in control. And the reason is it's going to get so bad that there's nothing you can do, you physically, you as a human being, to deal with or overcome the situation. It's going to be that bad. So it's important, it's imperative that you connect with God at this point. I'm telling you, time is short, and I know it, and I feel it. Just personally speaking, from some life experience that I'm going through right now, I can tell you it is critical that you understand this now. And this all ties into it. This, and Tony, when do you foresee that they're going to fire this thing up and actually go to that power level and start going there? Is it, you said September 2017, is that right?
Yeah, I'll give you some specific dates if people want to write these down. And I'm not a date setter. I'm just reflecting the calendar from CERN itself on their use of the Large Hadron Collider, and more specifically the Awake linear particle accelerator that they are conjoining with the LHC, or the VHEEP as we're calling it. This is next year, 2017. October 23rd, they will finish their proton experiments where they've been calibrating the machine, doing machine development by sending proton streams, test streams, into what they call the North Area target at the center point of the main ring. from October 23rd through December 18th, when they conclude their experiments, they will be filling the Awake plasma accelerator with a inert gas.
Xenon, correct?
You got it, baby. Xenon, and the noun for it is xenon. Yes. And that is a poisonous gas, is what xenon translates to. It's a colorless, odorless, tasteless, if you had to, gas that they will be using. And that will be the first part of the plasma wake field environment that they're creating within the particle accelerator called Awake. Now, the other date is the actual collision of particles. These will be protons and ions of lead. They call it P/PB. So that's protons versus PB, which is ions of lead. They'll be colliding those from the 11th of November, 11/11, next year, all the way through December 3rd. So the conjoining of the machines, the ramping up of the power, I expect in November through December, somewhere in that time frame, they are going to hit 20 peta electron volts. Will it result at that time frame in the opening of the portal? I do not know. I suspect it is. It would be just pure speculation on my part to say that it is.
I think they're quite worried about when they hit that 20 peta electron volts, because we talk about luminosity on here, and that's basically how many collisions are taking place, the brightness of it, the energy released. And when they start going to that high level, Tony, we were reading about how the luminosity comes down dramatically. But that's because they just need to create that one connection, isn't it? And then the D wave takes care of the rest.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to the point that they are concentrating these particles, as we said before, and so they're getting higher efficiency. Luminosity is almost a waste product, a waste process. What they're really shooting for is using the collimators to compress the beam around its circumference and use the magnets to hold them in a tight, closely spaced bunching. They bunch right now at 25 nanoseconds between bunches. Bunches have, and these are their terminology, the bunches have billions of particles within each one, and they're only 25 nanoseconds apart, in other words, passing by a fixed target. They're almost already solid, as we talked about. And what I'm trying to say here is that they're compressing these down so that they can get a much more efficient energy release and have very little wasted energy in the form of luminosity.
Starting to get it now, Joe.
I'm going to go pick up my brain. I'll be right back. Excuse me.
But you know, these actual plasma accelerators, I mean, I'm a geek. They're actually pretty cool as well.
Yeah,
because
no, I want one.
This means we could get like accelerators into labs, into doctors' surgeries, all the benefits that could come from that. Again, It's that whole duality, isn't it?
It really is. And, you know, the spin-off, kind of like the space program, spin-off for positive things would be tremendous.
Yeah.
Well, Tony, you're just playing with spin because you know it sends me into my quantum realm. Talking of quantum realms, we'll be back after these short messages.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network. We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
There he is, the Wookiee, and that noise means we are back live on Freaky Friday, right here on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. I'm one of the Woo crew, Kev Baker. We've got Joe Joseph from the Freedom Link, and Kenneth Webb, and Scotty Lopez from Quest for Truth. Don't forget, after this show, Chris and Cherie Geo will take you beyond the veil. So there's no reason to go anywhere. Or as Whistle says, dinny touch that dial. Now I'm going to go totally off on a tangent here, but you listeners are going to love this. Because, Tony, I heard you speaking on one of the various interviews you've done about the times of Moses and when he received the commandments. Now, we picture all of this happening up atop a hill, lots of stonework and stuff like that going on. But you threw out a totally new idea that was absolutely breathtaking. Do you want to talk about that, Tony?
Holograms.
Haha, you knew where I was going.
Oh,
this is
really?
amazing.
Yeah, it appears that the Ten Commandments were actually the letters and the numbers, of course, inscribed on the stone tablets were holographic projections, and that when Moses held them up and turned them about to show the flock, to show the crowd, that the letters and numbers actually hovered in the air above the surface of the tablets themselves. And once he threw the tablets on the ground and broke them, suspended in the air were the same letters and numbers until the hologram finally ceased. What do you think about that idea?
Wow. That's pretty interesting. First of all, for anybody that that's listening, if you don't believe in, Moses going up the mountain to Mount Sinai and doing all that, they found Mount Sinai. They know where it is. It's in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia fenced it off. Down at the bottom of Mount Sinai, the altar's still there where the golden calf was. It's all there. A great place to go check it out is WyattMuseum.com, WYATT. That's the work of Ron Wyatt. Now, Ron Wyatt, a lot of people like to poo-poo his work, but, and I say this with a resounding but, he's found some amazing stuff that's been verified. For example, he found where the Red Sea crossing was, because, and it's very telling because when you go to this place, why, there's chariots all down the bottom of the Red Sea floor. There was actually a land bridge that went across, and when the waters receded, of course, the Israelites went across, and then here come the chariots and the Egyptians, and then the waters came back on them. And the way that they verified that is they actually found Pharaoh's chariot at the bottom of the Red Sea, right where it was, because Pharaoh was the only one that had a 3-spoked gold chariot wheel. That was a 3. I think it was a 3-spoke, 3 or 4-spoke. But it was unique to Pharaoh, and they found it at the bottom of the sea using some, and it was gold. So, I mean, whose it was. So all of these things, everybody says, well, I need this evidence, this tangible evidence. It's there, But isn't that interesting, Tony, how you brought up like the hologram? That to me would be more like what I would believe I would see. You know what I mean? Like that stone, you show it to somebody and the letters pop right out, and they all, no matter what language you speak, you understand it.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about signs and wonders and supernatural events and occurrences taking place. I mean, this is nothing for God to do that. That's child's play.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is some amazing stuff. I'm going to put that link in the chat room for everybody that wants to go check this out.
Let's get Scotty in here, because I know Scotty can't hit 1 in the chat room here, and I bet he's dying to say something. But Scott, I bet like me, you never ever thought of the possibility that Moses was looking at holographic technology.
Well, I mean, wow. I mean, that's an amazing thing to think about. But, it kind of does make sense. When you look at all of the depictions of it and everything, you see like light coming off of the tablets and stuff like that. So it would totally make sense that there was some kind of, ancient technology being, involved in all of that. It does. It totally makes sense to me. More mind meltage going on here. I'm still scooping stuff up. Scooping my brain up.
We've made the comparison of CERN to the Tower of Babel many times, and really it was high technology for that time. What they were using was their ability to commune with spirits, to commune with the other side to a much higher degree, much higher level than we're able to do today. And so we're dependent upon technology of today to replace what spiritually they were able to do. Mm-hmm. And the goal was to reach up to heaven. The goal of Nimrod was to reach into heaven. Nimrod was responsible for building the Tower of Babel. And he was probably, next to Lucifer, the most evil person that has ever lived. I think your guest even talked about him, that there's some confusion as to whether he was a Nephilim or a giant. But he was, as your guest said, he was a human. He possibly was partially human, partially Nephilim, but he was not immortal. But Nimrod hated God. And I totally agree with your guest. I'm sorry I don't have his name in front of me, but as we have said many times, and I'm sorry I'm repeating that, but I'm just letting people know we've had these discussions before, and we're just doing the repeat for the benefit of people that haven't heard this. But Lucifer believes that he can kill God and kill God's angels, and he has a weapons program to do that, and that's what CERN is all about. It's a weapons program, besides opening the portal, and that's what Nimrod was involved in, weapons technology and the goal to kill God.
And Nimrod, he was part of that early ruling class that today we can fast forward and compare to the royal families, it's people like that, and they are doing the bidding of Lucifer. It's a grand plan. Last night was so profound, Scott. It connected a lot of dots for me. It gave me a whole new perspective on looking at the entire big picture, even a time before I thought there was a time that was. It was crazy, Scott.
Well, even if you look back, I mean, now it's kind of making sense too, because didn't the Ark of the Covenant, wasn't it, doing things that sound like holographic projection, giving people visions and projecting images and stuff? So, yeah, I mean, it sounds like that's more ancient technology right there,
Right.
Surely.
Yeah.
Surely. And Nimrod was a direct descendant of Cush. Cush was Nimrod's father. Cush came from Ham, and Ham was a son of Noah. So you've got Noah, and after the ark settled, you had Shem. Now Shem was the line that Abraham came from, and Jacob and everybody else. But Ham was the line that that Nimrod descended from. So, this is the thing. Genealogy is amazing, and it all flows. So that's the thing that you got under. You could trace this all the way back, and there's a lot of different theories about how this happened. You got the multiple incursion theory. You've also got just the fact that they didn't quite make it, meaning that there was some sort of, say, like impurity, not so much with Noah's family, but perhaps with one of the wives. So there's a whole host of different theories on this, Kev.
Joe, I almost laughed out loud there. I apologize. I wasn't laughing at what you're saying. It's just everything connected, because CERN was used to do what? They used these particle accelerators to crack the human genome. And I still have a strong suspicion that this whole drive to get all of our DNA off us, send in your DNA profile, stuff like that, find out your genealogy, I think they're looking for some kind of genetic marker that obviously a lot or some of us have. Whether it makes us special in some way, I don't know, but it in itself
sounds
must
like
be
X-Files.
Like some kind of key, Joe, or possibly they're wanting to see if they've altered the DNA enough, turning us into this new race, this new man that they're determined to make us.
You remember that, what was it? Was the last episode of X-Files, I think, where they had to have the genetic marker in order to survive?
Mm-hmm.
I think we're getting to that point, It just seems to me that you've got that going on. You got the work of Dr. Craig Ventnor, who, for lack of a better term, can take anybody's DNA and recreate you at this point, or at least a shell of you. You open up this pit, and now these beings can inhabit these bodies, and who knows if they've got them stored away somewhere, So, I mean, the technology that exists is so much farther advanced than what we're told. But hey, as long as you've got your Samsung Galaxy 7, why, everything is going to be okay.
And of course,
Or your
Tony,
iPod 7.
and of course, Tony, you cover a lot of this with your co-authors in revising reality. I mean, it's got to the stage now where they don't even have to use us as shells for these entities because they can create entirely synthetic beings. And just the other day, we were covering how they've managed to produce egg cells and then gone to have embryos out of cells that didn't start off being egg cells at all. This is totally Frankenlife we're talking about. So if you'd like to even start telling us about revising reality and the work you've done with your co-authors, that'd be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We're limited by time, and we tried to be as brief and maintain the focus of the audience on our subjects. So what I've done is collaborate with 3 other authors. Douglas Woodward, who's a university professor. He's our editor-in-chief and publisher, if you will. Gon Shimura from Face Like the Sun, and Josh Peck. And each of us have our own areas of research, but what we're really doing is this gives us a platform and an opportunity to go into the real details of what we just hit the highlights of when we're conducting these interviews. Even 3 hours isn't enough to really get into the depth of what we're covering in this book. So I really encourage people that if you have an interest in the things that we talk about and you'd like more information, the book's only going to be $21.95 to order. It's not an expensive book. It's 360 pages, and we cover, just in the major topics, the major headlines, at least 8 different areas, but we break it down into about, I want to say, probably 30 different chapter items that we get into the weeds on. And it's compelling. We talk about theology. We talk about science. We're transhumanism, of course, CERN, and of course, the electric model of the universe are my principal contributions. But we also talk about defining what is evil. How do we perceive evil? And all 4 of us are Christian authors, so we take it from that perspective. But it's a definitive graduate level textbook, but it's easy to read. We purposely wrote it so that it was easy to read, but the information is graduate level, PhD level research. And that's not, me being full of myself here. This is not my own, pontification or hubris. Because of Douglas Woodward's guidance as a professor, we were able to raise the bar as to providing the evidence, providing the footnotes, providing the detailed information to substantiate what are not necessarily just claims, nor just reflections of history, but really applying it to today so that people understand the impact of what has happened to our reality because of science. The priesthood of science has hidden their processes within science from mainstream people, and they are constantly changing our reality. And we talk, about the Mandela effect. Massive psychological operations are going on a daily basis that affect everybody on the planet. And so I'd like to use that as a segue when you're ready for it to talk about the sentient world simulation. Well, but the book is very detailed.
Yeah, just to back up what you say about the book there, obviously, all the stuff that we talk about on here is basically just highlights. And as we move into this new interdimensional reality that we obviously are progressing into, this kind of book will be like a reference guide. You'll be able to go there, and it's going to actually stand the test of time, I think, because the topics in that, just like Tony's proved on my show and Freaky Friday before, they're well ahead of the curve. And even some of the information that you guys out there listening to tonight, this is university level, and I know that because when I go and try and catch Tony out and try and trick him and see if he's really right, I have to go to places like Stanford and all these big highfalutin facilities and listen to really dry and boring presentations. But here they are teaching the best and brightest out there the exact same stuff as Tony's telling me way in advance. So if you're hanging with us and actually staying along with us tonight on these topics, give yourselves a big pat on the back, because this really is university level stuff. Now then, the sentient world system. Here we go, or the simulation. Now, Tony, this is a realm, a dimension where we exist. Absolutely a carbon, well, not a carbon copy, a digital copy of each and every one of us. We're the carbon copy. It's the digital full copy. And, you know.
Nice save, my
exactly,
friend.
Definitely, yeah. But the thing is, every single piece of information that we share online, it is fed into this other dimension where there's 7 billion nodes in there, and it's got that much computing power and information held on us that they literally can predict everything we're going to do, right?
That's right. You know, we talked about model numbers with D-Wave's computers. The 1024 is the one that D-Wave themselves references as having the equivalent processing power of 7 billion human brains. And understand that a human brain processes at any given moment about 1 petaflop of data. I mean, that's just an extraordinary number. Anyway, moving on from the 1024 to the 2048 and now the 4096, we're well beyond the capability or the processing equivalency of 7 billion human brains. I haven't done the math yet. I think you've triggered a thought for me is to sit down and do the mathematics and determine what's the equivalency now at the 4096 level. But with that said, this is the computer system that is responsible for operating a worldwide simulation. This comes out of Purdue University. I shared with you the draft white paper that was produced out of Purdue in 2006, in which they were proposing the building of a worldwide simulation called the Sentient World Simulation, SWS. And you can Google that. It's no big secret. It's been running now actively since 2007. The entire planet, not just all the humans, but the entire planet is represented in a virtual matrix now, virtual environment. Every person is represented as a node, and every person is given an avatar. Now, this is right out of the university papers. I'm not making this up. In order to run this system, you had to have a quantum computer such as we've described this evening. And therefore, now everything real-time, 24/7, 365, everything is being monitored, everything is being tracked, every person and every piece of information. And this is responsible for things like the Mandela effect, which is as we had covered before, what I call quantum pollution. This is bleeding over through the D-Wave computers from the multiple parallel dimensions, information into our environment. We're already seeing the environment being changed. But more importantly, as I said, we are being played. This is a game. This is a psychological operation, and there are multiple psyops that are being run on us every single day. So when people ask the question, does this have any relevancy to me when I get out of bed every morning and go to work? Yes, because it's affecting your mind. I'll stop there.
Well, Joe, you were the one that first led me to this whole sentient world simulation. And just before the show, and we've played it on Freaky Friday last week and on the Kev Baker show, we were listening to Elon Musk, and he was basically saying what Tony said there in different wording. He said that basically right now we are already cyborgs, albeit in a digital way. And that's exactly what he's talking about here, right?
I think so. You know, I think it'd be relevant right now to play that clip again, just to show how crazy these people are. You know what I mean? There's this is not smart. We'll put it that way. You mind if I play that clip, Kev? Because I was blown away by it. And I don't think that we can't stress this enough. We are really on the precipice of destruction. I really, truly think so. Here you go.
Something that I think is going to be quite important, and there's not. I don't know of a company that's working on it seriously. Is a neural lace. So going back to the AI situation, this is quite an important debate. If you assume any rate of advancement in AI, we will be left behind by a lot. And so then we could be in benign situation, but even the benign situation, if you have if you have ultra intelligent AI, we would be, so far below them in intelligence that it would be like, a pet, basically.
Cat, that's what I was thinking.
Like a pet.
Cat.
Like a cat. It'd be
Elon
like
the
a house cat. Yeah,
right.
it would be like the house cat.
Right.
So that's not the end of the world,
Well,
sort of pet.
I've seen the movie. It could be. Yeah.
It could be. Honestly, that would be the benign scenario. And
so house cat is okay.
I mean, I don't love the idea of being a house cat.
Okay.
But
so what's the solution?
Yeah, so I think I think it's to essentially, I think one of the solutions that seems maybe the best one is to have an AI layer. If you think of you've got your limbic system, your cortex, and then a digital layer, sort of a third layer above the cortex, that could work well and symbiotically with you. I mean, just as your cortex works symbiotically with your limbic system, your sort of a third digital layer could work symbiotically with the rest.
This is something that's surgically inserted or bred into the species, or what?
The fundamental limitation is input-output. So we already have, we're already a cyborg. It's just that, you have a digital version of yourself or partial version of yourself online in the form of your emails and your social media and all the things that you do. And you have basically superpowers in that with your computer and your phone and the applications that are there. You have more power than the President of the United States had 20 years ago. That you can answer any question, you can video conference with anyone anywhere, you can send a message to millions of people instantly. You just do incredible things. And but the constraint is input output. So we're IO bound, particularly output bound. I mean, your output level is so low. It's particularly on a phone, like your two thumbs are sort of tapping away. This is ridiculously slow. Our input is much better because we have a high bandwidth visual interface to the brain. Like our eyes take in a lot of data. So there's many orders of magnitude difference between input and output. So mostly, effectively merging in a symbiotic way with digital intelligence revolves around eliminating the I/O constraint. So it'd be some sort of direct cortical interface.
And you called it a neural lace?
Neural lace, yeah.
It's totally not Google Glass, right?
No, I'm talking about something
but it's like you wear it? Or
No, I mean, it would be... there are a few ways to approach this, but some sort of interface directly with your cortical neurons, particularly.
But doesn't that imply surgical insertion?
Not necessarily. You could go through the veins and arteries because that provides a complete roadway to all of your neurons. Your neurons are very heavy users of energy, so they need high blood flow. So you automatically, with your veins and arteries, have a road network to your neurons.
Still some kind of surgery, right?
Yes, but you could insert something, basically, into the jugular and have. It gets macabre, but
it sounds really easy and
it doesn't involve.
risk-free.
It doesn't involve, like chopping your skull off or anything like that.
That's good.
Yeah.
And plus, you're not a house cat anymore.
And plus, you're not a house cat anymore. And this is where we're going, folks. This is where they want to take us. Because #Borg's life matter. Borg's lives matter. That's right.
You must unite what has been set asunder.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are moving into the last hour of Freaky Friday already. And don't despair, folks, because still an hour to go with Mr. Anthony Patch. Check out his work over at anthonypatch.com. And Chris and Cherie Geo right after Freaky Friday, taking you beyond the veil. Now, Elon Musk, we've listened to him time and time again, and it's always worth listening to because we are getting a window into where we are going. Digital cyborgs existing in this sentient world system. And at one point in there, and if he calls me a cat one more time, I am going to kick him in the head. But think about that, folks. A domesticated pet. And then cast your mind to the Georgia Guidestones. 500 million of us living in balance, as they call it. But I can assure you, all 500 million of those that are there in that world are not going to be elites living the fine life that the elite cats of today are planning. The rest of us, the majority of us in that 500 million, will be no better, no higher than a domesticated animal. Look at, they give soldiers dog tags. That's the way they view us, and that is exactly where we would end up in that system that Musk, who, bear in mind, is at the cutting edge of nanotechnology and all of this stuff, he knows exactly where we're going. And that is why he was pausing. That is why he was struggling. He was trying to be a politician, take them away from the question, how do we get this neural lace, Joe? And eventually he had to give us it. It's going to be through our bloodstream.
Yeah.
Could be that with chemtrails, Joe, and, Morgellons and things, that could be the start of it.
It could very well be. Or it could be a survival mechanism. Once they unleash the Kraken, if you will, this could be the only way that human beings can survive, is if they do this. Since we were talking about, cubes and Saturn and the tying of, basically these planets and, between CERN and everything else, I find it interesting that the Cassini space probe is also kind of mapping Saturn, its magnetic fields and everything else in its final year. And this is according to phys.org. It says, after more than a 12-year study of Saturn, its rings and moons, NASA's Cassini spacecraft has entered into its final year of its epic voyage. Beginning on November 30th, Cassini's orbit will send the spacecraft just past the outer edge of the main rings. And these orbits, a series of 20, are called the F-ring orbits. During these weekly orbits, Cassini will approach within 4,850 miles of the center of the narrow F-ring with its peculiar kinked and braided structure. And during the F-ring orbits, we are expected to see the rings along the small moons and other structures embedded in them as never seen before, basically giving them a picture or a idea of, the construction of it. And in the last act, the grand finale, they call it, and Cassini's final phase, beginning in early April 2017, a close flyby of Saturn's giant moon Titan will reshape the spacecraft's orbit so that it passes through the gap between Saturn and the rings, an unexplored space only about 1,500 miles wide. And the spacecraft is expected to make 22 plunges through this gap. And during the grand finale, Cassini will make the closest ever observation of Saturn, mapping the planet's magnetic and gravity fields with exquisite precision and returning ultra-close views of the atmosphere. Scientists also hope to gain new insights into Saturn's interior structure, the precise length of a Saturn day, and the total mass of the rings, which will help finally settle the question of their age. I just find it interesting when they start talking about analyzing the magnetic field and just how important that is in relation to, the connection between Saturn and CERN. And this is happening just before the Awake device actually goes online and starts doing actual for real operations. So
for real.
So Tony, do you find or maybe speculate a little bit? Is there a tie between what Cassini's doing and, feeding back maybe some information to kind of calibrate everything for this final?
Yep. You're right on
push?
it. Wow. You're right on it. It's a targeting probe. Targeting probe. It's making the final connection, the final alignment, the final calculations of the alignment of the planets. There's been speculation, some people have said the plutonium that's on board is going to ignite Saturn, it's going to reignite it. And no, it's very small amounts of plutonium. Each one's in separate compartments, and they function as heaters to keep the electrical components from freezing. So that's all the plutonium does. It provides some energy as well, but point is plutonium and igniting Saturn is preposterous. I do view the last stages as just setting it up as the final targeting for the link up.
I almost look at it like a JDAM or something like that, where you have the laser, somebody has to point the laser on target, and then the smart bomb will go and follow that laser straight down.
There you go.
That's kind of how I view it. And so on September, I want to say it's September 15, 2016, the grand finale will come to an end as Cassini dives into Saturn's atmosphere, returning data about the planet's chemical composition until the signal's lost. Friction within the atmosphere will almost certainly cause the spacecraft to burn up like a meteor soon afterward. So, very interesting how that happens right before.
Well, Joe, if we factor in now the other story that we've covered in recent weeks with the Chinese quantum communication satellites that are up there, if we're going to be sending this quantum key, then you would have to think we might need some quantum technology to rebroadcast that, target it, focus it, whatever. But I'm thinking these Chinese quantum satellites, or some that are yet to be launched, quite like them, they're going to be quite key in this whole process as well. And being an old radio guy, when I think of Cassini going in to Saturn, I think of that as like the distant station that I'm trying to hit, because if you're sending a signal, you need something to receive it, right, Tony?
That's correct. And now Cassini's going to burn up in the gaseous atmosphere, so there really won't be anything of it left. But I do think that you're on target, but I think the target is actually the southern pole of Saturn, which is connected to the northern pole through the cube by the synchrotron energies generated by the, quote, naturally occurring synchrotron particle accelerator at the northern pole of Saturn, the hexagon, the contra-rotating clouds of synchrotron energies. That's the power source for Saturn, is the northern pole. The southern pole, which is a spiral, functions as a receiver.
And another planet that has this 4 or 4096 coding is Jupiter. And of course, Juno, it's been taking a close look at that just lately. And all the scientists, they've been shocked and in awe of the fact that they didn't expect the North Pole of Jupiter to look the way it did, Tony. Now, I was expecting to see some kind of hexagonal kind of formation there. But when you actually look back to now the Thunderbolts project, and you can catch them at thunderbolts.info, I believe, they actually say that when we now see the images of Jupiter and the anomalies, as the scientific world call them, well, they actually fit perfectly with this electrical universe model.
Yeah, and I remember you talking about the storm, the eye on Jupiter, and we talked about the fact that, it has relevancy to the northern pole of Saturn, and that we conjectured that the eye probably had a hexagonal pattern to it. And Stan Deo, who wrote the foreword for our new book, Revising Reality, Stan Deo wrote a beautiful foreword. And I spoke with him about the northern pole of Saturn, and he was kind of shocked by some of the conclusions that I just presented to you. But here's another individual. I was on with Richard Hoagland about 3 weeks ago, and I said, Richard, I do believe that if you look at the northern pole of the sun, you will note that it has a hexagonal pattern to it as well. And much like Doug Hagman's story about the cube and how Doug was so shocked about the confirmation, Richard Hoagland said to me, "How do you know that? There's only very few people on this planet that even know that. How do you know that?" He said, "I got that from my sources, and they're very deep." And I said, "It's pure physics. It doesn't surprise me. It probably exists on every planet."
And you know, it's Richard C. Hoagland, Scott. He blew me away back when I first woke up because he was talking about the storm on Jupiter and the fact that there's a direct correlation between where that sits on the planet and the Great Pyramid here on Earth, because they both sit on that 19.5 parallel.
Well, now my brain is starting to, the gears are turning now, because we have all of this stuff going on, you know, with the Cassini, doing its final hoorah over at Saturn. And it brings me back to, you know, why is it that they chose to put a replica sort of marker of Saturn on the South Pole this year when they marked the the location of the South Pole here on Earth? Their little marker has a thing on the top that looks like Saturn, and you see all of this activity going on now around Saturn. And I just wonder, do they know? Do they know that they're going to be tapping into something soon with Saturn, and that they've marked it sort of as a, just on the South Pole here on Earth? It just it's really bizarre.
Yeah, they're planting the flag, acknowledging to the other powers that be that those that went on that expedition are all tied into the occult societies, the dark mystery societies surrounding the worship of Saturn. So it's planting the flag of Saturn there, just an acknowledgement of it. But going back to 4096, Kev, you mentioned that, it's tied to Saturn and Jupiter and also to Venus. When you translate 4096, here are some of the things that come up. First of all, 4096 is translated directly as the doorway or the threshold. It's also translates to Shiva, and Shiva is the father of Ganesha. 4096 translates to Ganesha, as you put up on the graphic, the elephant figurehead, and both of these are deities of the Hindu religion. And of course, Shiva is at CERN. I'm surprised they don't have Ganesha standing there next to Shiva as a statue. But Ganesha has to do with learning and intellect, and again, tied into CERN, Saturn and Jupiter and Venus. So all these things factor in together. 4096 is the nexus of this. It is the key, not only to the bottomless pit, but all of these projects, whether you're talking computers, you're talking theology, spirituality, you're talking about symmetry, supersymmetry, string theory. Everything ties to 4096. It is the number one number out there that we have to pay attention to.
Yeah, and of course, it was the 2048 that we started seeing, since you're talking about Nexus, these Nexus points that created what people commonly refer to as the Mandela effect.
Oh,
no. I did. I went
Is
there.
it Mandela or is it Madala? I'm only saying because there's Madala articles,
Exactly. No, I'm just going with what people know, because they're very, that's a very common term these days, is the Mandela effect. But I have to go back to that picture of the scientist that had the Bond one and Mandela,
But let me real quickly let people know that if they go to anthonypatch.com, go to Urgent Discoveries tab, scroll down, you'll see the photograph if you haven't posted it already. But that is it. Bond has to do with James Bond. It has to do with Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo and James Bond has to do with, what was the name of the movie? I always forget what the name of the movie is.
Casino Royale.
Casino Royale, thank you. Casino Royale and James Bond refers to and is translated to Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo is a statistical tool in particle physics. Did I lose you guys?
No, we're right here. We got you.
Okay. Sounded like it dropped. It's the tool that they use in physics to predict the behavior of particles after collisions, the trajectory, the spin, all that stuff. So that Monte Carlo is a mathematical, statistical, predictive algorithm. Now, Mandela, obviously, we're looking at the Mandela effect. The two are joined. The reason that I talk about Monte Carlo is because that is directly tied not only to particle physics and the collider, but back to D-Wave's computer systems, because this is how they develop psychological profiles, behavioral modeling of human subjects. And so the Mandela effect is a pebble in the pond of humanity, the psyche of humanity, and they track and develop mathematical algorithms of tracking and predicting human responses to the pebble in the pond. So who's looking at the Mandela effect? How are they reacting to it? Who are they sending the messages to and communicating about? The same thing with Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is a psychological operation just like the Mandela effect. That is to draw people into a virtual augmented environment, to draw people into the sentient world simulation, and to demand to exist in this augmented reality versus our normal, natural, if you want to call it, analog environment. What is happening here is we are being gamed. Whether you want to talk about Monte Carlo as a game or Pokemon as a game, we are psychologically being gamed. And to me, that's a pejorative. That's an insult to say to somebody, you're being gamed. That's as if you're ignorant and stupid of what's happening. But we as a human race are being gamed by the sentient world simulation.
Wow. And what's also interesting, too, is, since we're talking about behavior modeling, I mean, everybody can see how, and we'll use Scotty's favorite game, Pokemon Go, just the advantage of, all it takes is like a government or whatever. And right now, the government of Japan is using it to lure people back into the Fukushima prefecture where they've decontaminated because they want to get people living there again, right? And all it takes is to put some of those special little Pokemons, those rare Pokemons in there, and people will come in droves, And the other thing, too, is to think about this. That's all it takes is a little augmented reality, and you can have people do whatever it is you need them to do. Say, for example, you want to pull off a false flag or something like that, and you need some victims, if you will, put a Pokemon in there. You'll get a bunch of people, and you can pull your false flag off or whatever. So I can definitely see where this is going. But, the thing that they really had to do is lay the groundwork. They had to strip people basically of their critical thinking skills. They had to get people hooked on these devices, on the culture of convenience. And now they have a willing slave population that'll basically do whatever they want them to do. Just got to give them throw them a little bone. And in this case, it doesn't cost them anything because it's all augmented reality. And it's just going to get worse as time goes on. Isn't that right, Kev?
Yeah, and if we take it back to what last night's guest was saying about Lucifer having this long-term plan, this is exactly what it's all about. Because order out of chaos, and they are throwing us into chaos right now, but the main aim of all of that in the end of the day is control. And right now, we are teaching that sentient world system everything about us, and through machine learning, eventually, one day, very, very soon, it's going to have cracked it. And that is when we are going to be fully controllable. Think about what Elon Musk was saying with a neural lace. We might not even be aware that it's there, folks. And then with 4,000 satellites that he's determined to launch around the world, you can imagine thoughts, well, are they even ours anymore? It's all about this Luciferian control system. These elites have been throwing this kind of stuff at us for years, and it's ultimately coming to this crescendo. It's exactly where they're wanting to take us. And Tony, I'll get you to either say I'm right or I'm wrong and then take it from there.
No, you're right. In terms of nanoparticles, changing the DNA structure of the human and that progression, it's not just DNA that's going to be part of changing, the body, but also changing the brain, changing the mind. The neural lace will grow from the nanoparticles. These will be tendrils, tentacles that will move all through the neural pathways of the brain. And it just made me laugh how he was stumbling over his words because, let's use his own word. He couldn't let the cat out of the bag because, boy, he knows exactly how this is going on. Right now, we have, as humans, inhaled around the planet nanoparticles from the aerosolized spraying, the chemtrails, and these nanoparticles lay dormant. They will be triggered by microwaves. The satellites for free internet access is nothing more than the geosynchronous satellites that will be employed to broadcast the signals to trigger these nanoparticles, which will then change our DNA and also construct the neural lace. And at that point, people will be changed. Now, from my Christian perspective, I believe that if you don't take the mark of the beast, you end up being killed. You'll be martyred for it. But you will not be part of this neural lace system. If you take the mark of the beast, the neural lace will take over.
What? Neural lace? That's better. It sounds so much better than like tentacles of death going through your brain and totally taking over who you are and becoming a good drone. As if
about a science fiction movie.
Oh man, I know, but isn't that interesting? Neural lace. I mean, he really had to beat around the bush on that one because I can totally see how like he said, you go up the jugular into the brain, this kind of stuff. Do you really need to do that? Well, like we said with chemtrails, why not just inhale it?
Yep, we already have.
People don't realize that. People don't realize that in the back of your sinus cavity, there's nothing there but like a little barrier, and then there's the brain. It's not like there's not much there. As a matter of fact, that barrier, I don't think that's that. There's that brain-eating amoeba or whatever it is that people get from time to time when they don't use distilled water in their neti pots.
And Joe, we've got a particle accelerator here down in Oxfordshire, and it goes by the Diamond Light Array or something like that. And their whole mission is to find ways of making nanoparticulates easier to enter the body, i.e. our immune system doesn't recognize them and attack them. Sometimes our immune system will be the thing that triggers them. But all of this, when you factor it into Elon Musk and what he's talking about, I mean, they're basically practicing how to get this lace into our brain with total ease, no rejection. And I wonder if the early kind of models of this was rejected, i.e. Morgellons.
Or at least Morgellons could have been like a test or a precursor.
Yeah, it's like Model 1, version 1. The immune system attacks it. We get itches. We show signs or symptoms. But now Model 2, 3, and, we're all getting laced with it.
It's very interesting.
The name of that synchrotron accelerator, Diamond?
Yes, I'm going to go and I'll get you the link right now. I'll drop it in the chat room as well. Yeah, it's the Diamond.
Go ahead.
No, on you go. I'm just digging it up just now.
Yeah, no, it speaks to the nanodiamonds that I've always talked about and written about in my 2 novels.
It's the Diamond Light Source. That's what it's called.
There you go. Because diamonds are not rejected by the human body, just like gold. So the nanoparticles are nanodiamonds, just as I wrote in my novels.
And that, of course, is Covert Catastrophe and 2048. There's that number again, Diamonds in the Rough. And when I first got that book, Joe, I honestly thought it was a vision of 2048 in the future until I started digging into it. And I can't recommend Tony's writing highly enough for people out there. Talk about an edge-of-the-seat experience. It's amazing, Joe.
So brain soup, Ken? I mean, is that what we got going on here?
I'm sitting here looking stuff up left and right, going just like, wow, man. It does. Every week it just opens up so much doors, and I have this big, huge list of things to look up. I just enjoy listening to it at this part, just like, wow. I'm starting to think about a lot of different things.
Hey, you want to talk about quantum entanglement?
Of course.
Oh, yes, please.
I tell you. Here's my latest thought on it. So that people understand, first of all, the definition. Two particles, they don't need to be identical. They can be separated by light years. If you measure, observe, or otherwise affect one particle, let's say it's here on the Earth in a laboratory, another particle that is quantum entangled, that is connected to another particle light years away, will simultaneously, no delay, exhibit the same change in behavior as does the one in this laboratory.
There's a good place to leave it, folks, and we will re-establish our quantum entanglement right after these short messages. Don't go anywhere.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
The wicked ones obviously under heavy Masonic influence.
Welcome back, everyone. It is the final segment, and it breaks my heart to say that right here on Freaky, or is it Frequency Friday, with the Woo Crew and our special guest, Mr. Anthony Patch. Check out his work over at anthonypatch.com. New book is out, Revising Reality. Now then, folks, we do live in the most interesting and crazy of times. Over the time that I've been, air quotes, awake, I've made some interesting connections. But as I've joined TFR as a host in particular, the people I am coming across, it seems to me as if it's almost by design. And I say that because I came across Tony absolutely randomly. Nano Girl, the same, randomly. But these two people have been highly, highly important people that I have come across. And this is something to do with the times we live and also the topic we're about to go into. Because I do believe that everything is interconnected at some level. And if you want to call that quantum entanglement, well, some of us feel that stronger than others. And this TFR community, I don't think it's any coincidence that we're all waking up at this time and we all land here out of all the millions of websites that exist. Quantum entanglements. Tony, what's that all about?
Yeah, thanks, Kev. And I've enjoyed our quantum entanglement. It's funny, we send emails to each other, and it's not all that infrequent that I'll hit send and you'll hit send at the same time.
It's strange. Nano Girl's the same. We'll be going to message each other and I'll see her typing, or she'll even pick up on an emotional day I'm having, Tony. I can be having a really rough day, and Nano Girl at some point will come along, message me, and it's as if she knows. But with this quantum entanglement, it could well be the case, right?
Yeah, I do believe it. And, we try not to sound like we're new age people, but the entire universe, since I've studied this electric model of the universe that the Thunderbolts Project first brought to my attention, it's really obvious from an intuitive standpoint that the entire universe is interconnected. Whether you're talking about planets or people or whatever, we're electrically connected. And as I was describing the definition of quantum entanglement that Einstein called spooky action at a distance, well, that was only because he couldn't measure it. They didn't have the tools to, take the spookiness out of it. But quantum entanglement has been proven in the laboratory. Here's the thing. I'd like people to set aside the notion of a signal being transmitted, like you send it through a telephone wire or through the internet or through radio. Set aside the classical model of physics. And on faith alone, if you have to take it that way, accept the notion that two particles light years apart can simultaneously respond, that they will respond to stimuli. And that's what quantum entanglement is. And therefore, if they are reacting or behaving simultaneously, that means there's no signal being transmitted. It means that they are already conjoined, that they're already functioning as one. And that takes time out of the equation. It takes time out of the discussion, because at the quantum level, time does not exist. Time is linear for our benefit, for how our brains that are limited view our analog environment. So if you take time out of this, then you can accept the notion that particles, no matter where they are, close or distant, are behaving simultaneously and responding to stimuli in the environment. And I think that helps us to wrap our head around how is it that this behavior, this phenomenon can be measured and reproduced in the laboratory and quantified as actually a physical phenomenon that's taking place. And it goes beyond electricity being connecting as the medium to connect. It is actually the quantum connection of everything in the known universe.
Quantum entanglements. And Tony, I believe even at one point you were describing the act of prayer as a form of quantum entanglement.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Here's a couple of scenarios. Number one, God's electric. That's how I view it. He communicates with us through quantum entanglement. But, in our way of sort of looking at it as a human, he's electrically communicating with us. More specifically, let's go to Jesus Christ. When we pray to Jesus Christ, we're quantum entangled with him, and we're electrically connected with him. And he is very much like energy at that point, again, in our human frame of reference. But when he manifests himself physically, in physical form, he's now a particle. He moves from his energy state to a particle state. So when you're praying, you're quantum entangled with Jesus Christ and also the Creator.
Absolutely. And Joe messaged me there, but sorry about that. But we talk sometimes about the double slit experiment as well on here. And there's been a variation of that, Tony, where they use something called a quantum eraser, and they can look at the particle in the future and it affects the past. But what Tony was saying there, remember, there is no time at that quantum scale. Because a lot of people say, well, if we can affect the past by altering the future and stuff like that, then this could explain Mandela effects. But this is all at this quantum subatomic level, Tony, where time doesn't exist, right? So it doesn't matter what point in the experiment you observe something, it's happened anyway via quantum entanglement.
Yeah, that's very true. And again, people have to suspend their notions of classical physics and the laws of physics when you're at the quantum level. It's a complete departure. And now with the advent of the higher power levels at the LHC and the collisions, they're moving into even new physics beyond the quantum level. So who knows what they're opening us up to? It's hard to say, but a lot of things that are mentioned in science these days still are in the realm of theoretical. And again, I want to emphasize that they're not proven experimentally. And even experiments can be finagled and played with in terms of results.
Exactly. And if not, you can just make up the math and explain it away as dark energy, something that's invisible, conveniently enough. But one thing that we can point to the fact that black holes and stuff like that are pure theory is the fact that Stephen Hawking, the guy who does an advert for Freaky Friday, albeit a very poor impersonation, he's never had a Nobel Prize. Never, ever had it. And he hopes that someday somebody can prove his theory of black holes. And that in itself, folks, tells you that they don't even know if they exist. And Ken, you were typing some woo in the chat about time there, dude. What's this all about?
I was just saying that if there was time, it will force action, as action induces the past. We talk about that. But I have a hard time, gentlemen, with the time doesn't exist thing. And I think that is because of the way, that it is pushed on you to have your time schedule. kind of thing. Like I know at 6 o'clock my time, it's Woo time on Freaky Friday. It's like a measurement thing. And so every time I hear that, the time doesn't exist, and I'm like trying to always wrap my head around it. And sometimes I think it's just the way my mind is structured. Our minds are structured all the time about time and what it's supposed to be, and that's the confusion I get. But I was just thinking.
I think the best way, Ken, maybe to think of that is think of our physical reality here with time. And part of the foundation that it's built on is that quantum kind of building blocks. When we're at the quantum building blocks, time is irrelevant there. It doesn't exist until you come further up into our physical, touchable reality. Would you say that's maybe fair, Tony?
Yeah, because at the quantum level, we're talking about a constant state. We're talking about a state that doesn't change. So therefore, time doesn't play a factor in the interaction of quantum particles. It's only when we choose to measure, when we observe and measure quantum particles, that time becomes part of the awareness of us as humans of those quantum particles, because we're affecting them, we're changing them through observation. Again, it goes back to the Schrödinger's cat issue. The point is that if we did not observe or attempt to measure the quantum particles, they would remain in their unchanged state. And that unchanged state is essentially eternity. There's no timeline involved because it's not changing. We view time because our environment changes.
You rock, Tony. Now that makes sense. I like the way you explained that. Oh yeah, you rock, brother.
Yeah, you've basically applied time to something that didn't have time applied to it.
It all comes to when you measure that, where that particle is. You're looking for the velocity of it or the position of it. And the mere act you're doing that, you're having to bring time into it.
That's correct.
Those hours of quantum lectures, they've done me well, I'm telling you. But for everyone out there, we're going to take maybe in a short while, with 10 minutes or 5 minutes to go, we'll get Tony to basically wrap all of this up with some kind of ribbon around it. Where does it leave us? Where are we going? At times, it's probably sounded as if we have no hope tonight, but that is far from the truth. That's what they would like us to believe. But we've still got a bit of time to go, Tony. So what else can we get into now? Kenneth Webb, Ken's got a question for you, I think, here, Tony.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Like, I had a question about CERN that I've been wanting to ask you. What do you think is going to come of that? Do you really think that they're going to open something up and something's going to come out? I mean, like, and if that's the case, what do you see happening in the future with CERN and what's going to happen? Because there's a lot of woo in there. There's a lot of possibilities and everything, but you really know your stuff about it. So I'm really curious to get your take on that.
Well, I based my statements on Revelation 9, as I mentioned, which describes the opening of the abyss, the fallen angel carrying the key, opening the abyss, and then all of the demonic entities coming out, the locust army, etc., and the return of the Nephilim. The reason that I'm so definitive about saying that CERN will be successful is because it's obvious to me that it is the technology, it is the tool, it is the key for fulfilling Revelation 9 as a prophecy. The timeline I can't give, even though I've given you the dates as far as the machine's operations. I don't know the time, and I'm not a prophet to give a timeline as to when they will be successful. But they will, as the Bible describes, the abyss will be opened, and this is the machine to do it. The reason
they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop until they succeed.
That's correct. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because Lucifer knows, and this is from Scripture, he knows he has but a short time. God's given him a little bit of leash. And he thinks in his hubris, as I keep saying, not only that he can kill God, but he thinks he can avoid judgment in that killing of God. He thinks that he can extend his time, that he can avoid being cast into the lake of fire by killing God's angels and killing God himself using these weapons technologies that he has had the human hands build for him.
You feeling better now, Joe?
Oh, much. And not at the same time.
Our entanglement had me feeling a bit queasy there. I hope you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's interesting, too, about that is also Revelation 7 and the 144,000. And in that day, it says, there'll be 144,000 of God's chosen people when on the earth when Christ returns. And
that's probably the amount of people that don't have an iPhone, Joe.
Well, interestingly enough, the Great Pyramid had 144,000 encasing stones, and if you look at a lot of the geometric, basically what I look at the Great Pyramid as, and it was a promise, at least in my guesstimation. It did many things. Of course, it was definitely had something to do with energy, frequency, and things like that. But to me, it is a depiction of what the New Jerusalem will be when it comes it comes down to earth, because the earth's going to be destroyed, going to be redone, and the New Jerusalem will come. And there's dimensions that's given in the Bible about how big it is and everything else. And there's two ways you can look at it. You can look at it as a cube or a square, a rectangle, or you can look at it as a pyramid. And so you've got that 144,000 encasing stones. And again, if you look at the geometry and the measurements of the Great Pyramid, there's a lot of information that is built into it. Just kind of like sitting outside the Great Pyramid, protecting it, if you will, is a lion. It's not a sphinx. It was a lion before it was a sphinx. And inside the lion was the Hall of Knowledge, right?
Yep. The library underneath it.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of these things kind of add up, but you got to get to the real history. That's the crux of it all. And they want to undo it. They don't want this to happen. But it's going to happen. And there's going to be a fight, and it's going to get nasty. So, and I truly believe, Tony, that, come up November 2017, we could really be seeing the start of, total and complete chaos. If it doesn't happen before that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if their public calendar is being deceptive, and that they spring the trap before then, that they spring it earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason why I say that is because they haven't really been forthright about anything. Even the quantum computer itself, talking about 2 to the 500th power when really it's 2 to the 9th, 2 to the 12th. Yep. So they're not giving us the same information that they're working with.
And that's why we're here.
And that's why we're here. Ain't that right, Kevster?
Absolutely. It's no accident we're all here at this time talking about these things. Guests coming along that connect dots. Unbelievable. All part of this entanglement that we were talking about earlier. But that's just my opinion, Joe.
Yeah, and isn't it convenient for them that they're able to simulate all this stuff prior to anything happening with their sentient world simulation? So, you know what? We want to see how this reacts. Let's see how people react to this. Put it in there, let it rip, see how the people react. Hey, if it reacts well or it does what they want, great. We execute. If it doesn't, back to the drawing board. Let's try it again.
Well, you said it well.
Go ahead, Tony.
No, you mentioned critical thinking skills, being analytical, being objective, seeing the game. Look at the chessboard, see it as a game, and get above it. Remove yourself. Get away from the game. Disconnect yourself from things. Be able to use your own mind and think about it. Don't let yourself be a victim of this psychological manipulation.
Yeah, you really have to break free of it. And again, I just recently came about an understanding that really has helped transform the way that I look at things and understand that we're not in control. Because at the end of the day, everything that you see is an illusion. Everything that you see is an illusion. And we often lose ourselves in the illusion of the mind, you know? And we have to break free of that and understand what the construct really is and who is really in control. And when you figure out who is really in control, then guess what? Things fall into place and you end up being a lot more sound in your judgment and in your discernment. And that's not to say that things don't get bad from time to time or we go through a dark season, because we all do. But there's hope. And as long as you can hold on to that hope, that's what's important. You don't want to fall into darkness.
But you know, Joe, right? We're getting very, very close to this Borg, cyborg, whatever name you want to put on it, matrix, because we've got Musk talking about it. And it seems like every week now we get closer. There's more stories telling us that it's getting close. We've got the whole AI system now. It's actually having conversations. It's able to do that. And that's because it's been listening to us with our microphones, learning this whole time. That, along with the sentient world system or simulation, you start feeding all of that back into one super artificial intelligence.
Right.
That's how close we are, Joe.
And let's think about this too as we wrap things up for tonight. And don't forget the Geo's coming up next. Do you want to stay tuned? All of the evil things that are afoot center around what? Cubes, right? What's all the stuff that has to do with light? You know, I talked about the New Jerusalem coming down. It's pyramids, triangles. Yet they want you to think that they're bad. If you ever notice in alt media is like, bad, pyramid. Oh, KBS has a pyramid on his logo.
That's why I chose it, Joe. I knew people would react.
Of course, but it's everything that you're told oftentimes is 180 degrees out of phase with reality. So just bear that in mind as you embark upon your research. Go ahead, Kev.
We live in a 600-cell tetrahedral universe, Joe.
Is that right? You don't say.
I think so.
I was just pondering that yesterday, Kev.
Wouldn't you say, Mr. Patch?
Yes, indeed. Thank you for plugging that. And that's in my book, Revising Reality, by the way. I talk about my model of the universe. So
yes,
I appreciate you tossing that in there, bud.
Even last night's guest, he hit on tetrahedrons. And once you start looking into this, it is going to be everywhere. Even the arrangement of qubits, Tony. They arrange them in tetrahedrons.
Even water. You know, everything. Tetrahedron.
All of the elements. When the elements are cold, no energy state, they're simple tetrahedrons. When they are energized, they begin to replicate and become more complex shapes of tetrahedrons. And finally, as I say, as above, so below, the quantum scale all the way out to the cosmological, it's been proven at all scales, the tetrahedron is the core shape. And the 600 cell is my representation of the entire universe.
Yeah, and when you look at 3D computer simulations, all the 3D models, their base is a tetrahedron.
Yep,
there you go.
Also, another alt media person out there, Dr. Len Horowitz, has done a lot of research into the tetrahedron and how that works and the healing power. You know, so there's a lot of validity to what's being said. Moreover, think about this, you know, when we talk about vibrational energy and things during the pre-Diluvian times, they were liquefying rocks with frequency, you know, molding stone. We can't do that today.
Can we stop calling them like Neolithic and megalithic and just call them Nephilimic structures?
Nephilimic? I like that, Nephilimic.
Nephilimic.
You're the man with the words tonight, Kev.
Definitely. Yes, you are.
Sounds like something Hillary would cough up.
It probably would be.
You took it there, Scotty.
Maybe they were melting rocks at the frequency of 4096.
They could very well be. You take a look at how things were constructed, especially down in South America, where you can't even slip a piece of paper through there because it's just so tight and so precise. Well, how do you do that? You couldn't cut stone today the way that they did that. Well, but if you liquefy it, when an earthquake happens, what happens to the ground? It's called liquefaction.
Yep.
Well, the same thing would happen if you blast stone with enough frequency. It breaks those bonds and liquefies it. And in a fashion that you don't have to melt it. You just mold it in this shape.
If the background microwave radiation of the universe has a wavelength of 4096 and a frequency of 73 hertz, I bet you that's what they use to take care of those rocks.
Perhaps we need an experiment. What do you say, Kev?
Absolutely, but the chat room are asking if it's possible to travel to other dimensions using our minds. And I imagine with the amount of alternative dimensions and realities that are out there, absolutely.
Just be careful what you wish for. That's all I got to say.
Exactly, Joe. I was just going to go there.
We're out of time.
There's good and there's bad. We're out of time,
guys. And it was great to have you here tonight, Tony. And don't forget, guys, September 30th to October 2nd, Knoxville, Tennessee. Hear the Watchman Conference. Tony will be there, as well as check out his book, Revising Reality, A Biblical Look into the Cosmos. You can go to his site, anthonypatch.com. Get it today. $21. Not so bad. And you get to learn a lot. If you like what you heard tonight, you can learn so much more by checking out his book. So go ahead and check it out today. But we're out of time. Thank you, Tony, for joining us. Ken, Scott, Kev.
Always a pleasure, guys. All this entanglement, it is strong.
That's right.
We'll have
God
to do
bless
this
you
sometime
guys.
soon.
Thank you.
Tony, thank you so much. And remember, folks, the Geos after the break, so didn't touch that dial.
Didn't touch that dial. Yes, we're out of time.
Tune in Monday to KBS. I've got the guy coming on to speak about the bee apocalypse.
Yeah, he's got that one guy coming on. You know, the guy with the hair? Yeah, he'll be there. Come on.
Talking about the bees.
I don't know his name. I've forgotten it. Come on.
And wherever you are, make it TFR.
Didn't touch that dial.
Good night, everybody.
What's up, brothers and sisters, truthers, Wookiees, and the donors of the 10-4 hat? Because we don't believe in magic bullets or buildings that fall like that, man. You know it's Freaky Friday, September 16th, 2016. And, man, as always, we got to give a big shout-out to all the awesome cats joining us in the chat room at truefrequencyradio.com/chat. Man, ain't got nothing but love for you guys and girls out there. And everyone else out there listening on the FM frequencies. 90.7 FM in Denver, Colorado, 97.3 in Eugene, Oregon, all around the world on the net, interdimensional cats, lizard aliens. We don't care where you come from. If you're here, you're going to get freaky with us, man. And sitting at the Roo Crew table tonight, we got the usual suspects, Kev Baker, Johnny Whistles, Joe Joseph, Scott Lopez, and I'm Kenneth Webb, a.k.a. Change the Channel. Man, and joining us tonight is our quantum brother, the CERN burn that makes your mind turn, Mr. Anthony Patch. Welcome to Freaky Friday, brother.
Woo!
Oh.
See, he's
CERN
speechless.
Burn.
He's speechless.
CERN burn.
Yep.
Been
And of
burned
course-
by those lead ions.
Absolutely. And of course, Tony Patch, anthonypatch.com. I also want to point out, guys, that you're going to be hosting a 3-day conference, September 30th to October 2nd in Knoxville, Tennessee. Hear the Watchman Conference. If you're in that area, go check out Tony and hear what he's got to say. And also, you got a new book coming out, which is pretty cool, Revising Reality, A Biblical Look into the Cosmos, How Dramatic New Discoveries in Biblical Text and Breakthroughs in Modern Physics Are Transforming Our Views of the Cosmos. We'll get into some of that tonight. And we'll be shamelessly plugging it all night for Tony, because that's how we roll around here on Freaky Friday. Kev Baker, how you doing, bud?
Oh, I'm locked. I'm loaded. I'm ready to go. And, you know, it's almost like divine intervention, the fact that last night's guest came out of nowhere, Gary Wayne. He talked about the Nephilim, and towards the end of the show, without any prompting whatsoever, he set us up perfectly for tonight, because he was talking about the abyss, about portals, about CERN, about quantum computers. And like I say, there was no planning in the fact that these two guests would follow each other. I can't think of two better guests to complement each other one night after the other. And talking of Gary Wayne, he is going to be on Freaky Friday 2 weeks from tonight. He needs 3 hours. He's going to go into great detail, and I can't wait for that one. But tonight's show, guys, this is going to be off the charts. And before we go anywhere, let's get Johnny Whistles. Head on over to the Batcave or the Wookiee section, tinfoil hat section, John, whatever you want to call it, because 45 people in there already.
Incredible, Keith. Again, thanks everybody for turning up in numbers. As you say, Keith, 45 in the tinfoil hat area. And let's start with our 3 in red. We've got Freeman 8, our brother Joe Joseph, and our sister Lucky. We've got Alex Mendez, Andrew Bison Giorgio. New name in there. We've got Astriana, we've got Ozzy Anzac, Bill Demarest, Calvin Long, we've got Charles Calvo, Chason, we've got Marilyn Monroe. Sorry, Sherilyn Monroe. We'll get Chrissy Freeman, Chris Smith, Chris Steiner, Daryl Bowles, Devlin, Throne Free Zone, Emperor of Woo, the lovely Gail Wood, Jeff Phillips, we've got Gergs, we've got Ginger Duckett, we've got Ian Tinsley, James Webster, the lovely Joy Williams and Kat Landry, Kenneth Webb, who's here tonight. We've got Lichty Lass, Mark Gibbons, Michelle Smith, Moira McRae, Moofish, Nancy Lalonde, One World Human, I think that could be. We'll get Regular Girl, we'll get Rocket Rat, Sam Ramirez, the lovely Sarah Clough, Scotty Lopez, our brother tonight. We'll get Spears Buddy, we'll get Star the Oracle, Thomas Silk, Timothy Bloom, Tony Phillips, and last but not least, Kev, number 49, Tracy Whitten.
49 in the chat, Joe. Locked and loaded for tonight's show. Now, we're going to be getting into a number of topics, guys, but Anthony Patch is a world-renowned CERNologist. That's my tag for him anyway. And over the years now, we have been ahead of the curve on everything that is CERN. Now, recently, we mentioned a new experiment that was going to be firing up, the Awake experiment. Now, this soup sings up no end.
It's not, I don't believe it's meant to be read from cover to cover. I don't think it is. It's more of a communication medium. But when you start to look at all of the history, the real history that went on pre-Diluvian, I mean, good grief. You're talking about a total different atmosphere. You're talking about, you know, guys like the horsetail, right? You know, the plant, the horsetail, looks like I don't know, it's probably like 3 or 4 feet tall, maybe up to 6 feet tall, or even a cattail. You've seen them before. Well, pre-Diluvian, those things, the stalks on them were the size of tree trunks. Trees were, you know, we're talking a mile high. You had giants that roamed the earth that were over 500 feet tall. You know, and then you wonder, we often see, you know, the footsteps of the dinosaurs and everything else. Like, for example, Brontosaurus. Brontosaurus couldn't live today in our atmosphere. Couldn't do it because he had the nostrils the size of a horse. The concentration of oxygen and the atmospheric pressure was different pre-flood. It was an entirely different world. It was like Jurassic Park on steroids, and everything was a lot bigger. Everything lived a lot longer. You know, and then you take a look at stuff like Adam and Eve. You talked about Adam and Eve, you know. The story of Adam and Eve, if you just go by the biblical account, is very, very condensed and vague. But you go with the oral record. You know, what was the oral record? The book of Adam and Eve. Oh, man. You want to talk about, just think about this, Kev. Let me just put it in perspective. Here you are. You're in a garden. And you're walking with God. And God made man in his own image, right? Which and to me that means that we were more of like an interdimensional, we had interdimensional capability. meaning that we could traverse, whereas, and then they screwed up and they lost that ability. Well, in the book of Adam and Eve, they can't live with themselves. It was unbelievable torment for them to be put in these flesh suits and then having to go through everything that they did. They committed suicide like half a dozen times. God had to bring them back. It's like, they jumped off the mountain again.
Joe, that knowledge that they took, say it came from Lucifer and then it was rife with these Nephilim as well.
Yeah.
The flood eventually came along, meant to wipe it out, but it didn't get rid of it. It didn't. No. And here we are today. And that's how it all connects to what we're talking about tonight, folks. Because that age, those beings, those fallen angels, all of that stuff, this is where we're now returning to.
Right.
And the priesthood at CERN, as Tony calls them, I mean, they are using this Nephilimic knowledge, I made up that word there, Joe, to basically bring about their return. It sounds
You're right.
dramatic, but that is exactly what they're trying to do.
That's
they're
exactly what
bidding for these people.
That's exactly what they're doing. And, a lot of people say, well, the Bible's a cruel book. It's a bloody book. Well, it is a bloody book at times. But you have to understand why it is. You have to understand it in context. And I know that's kind of a weird word for people that haven't embarked upon a field of study into it. But the ites of the Bible, especially in that time, like in the days of Jacob, the ites were the Nephilim, the giants, the leftovers. And, after the flood, they were still around. So God told Jacob, hey, you need to go and slay like the Amorites. Go slay them. The Amorites were like vampires. They were like vampire-like beings, if you could imagine. And they were giants. And they were just eating up everything. And so, yeah, God said, look, we got to get rid of these things because I didn't create that. That's a product of the Nephilim, of the fallen ones, No. We can't have that. So, a lot of people say, wow, where he says, kill every man, every woman, every children, all the children, the donkeys, everything. Just lay waste to everything because you have to, because if you don't, what happened before is going to happen again. And so they went and they did it. But good grief, I'll tell you what, we are fast approaching that again, if not already there. So, boy,
the thing is, Joe, those energies, we're going to start there tonight. And also, Tony's going to lay out what's going to be coming up at CERN in the next couple of months. So, Tony, we spoke about this Awake machine before, but now things are starting to get very real. The Awake team, they're meeting from the 19th to the 21st of September, and they are getting ready to do their stuff. Talk to the listeners about what's going to be going on there, Tony.
And even more than that, Tony, what is Awake for all our new listeners out there?
Well, we'll wake them up by just saying it's a plasma accelerator. It's a whole change from the gravity model to the electric model as far as accelerating particles. It's a 30-meter long linear or straight line particle accelerator that's being married up, conjoined up with the larger machine, the 27-kilometer main ring of the Large Hadron Collider. And it's 1,000 times more powerful than the larger machine.
Which was already pretty powerful because over the course of time, they've stepped up the power from 14 tera electron volts. What was it, to 1.3 or 1.4 peta electron volts, which, it's kind of like, how do you quantify that kind of number? You know what I mean? It's just so much. And then to go 1,000 times more than that. Oh, wow.
You can take that 1 peta electron volt, Joe. I think it's 1,000. Is it 1,000 million volts, something like that? A number you can't even picture. And they're going to times that by 20 because it's going to start hitting 20 peta electron volts. And that's when they start to factor in a whole new machine altogether, when they take this plasma accelerated electrons and start firing them into protons coming from the ring. But the best way for people out there to think of this plasma awake machine, just think of a body of water. something firing through underneath the water, creating waves on the surface. Now, on these waves, you see surfers in real life. Well, swap the surfers for electrons. Now, those protons are already souped up to high energy, firing through that plasma, and the protons on top, like Tony says, the energy is 1,000 times more efficient. And Tony, it doesn't stop there, because when they fill this with plasma and they start doing this time round, well, that's one thing. But they're already planning for something far more powerful when they start firing them and having collisions, right?
Yeah, the plan on the books is to go to a machine that's 100 times more powerful in terms of using the ring-based particle acceleration as opposed to just a linear. And so just the ring-based themselves, around 2035 is their goal, and that's always subject to change. But they'll change over from the magnets of niobium and titanium to niobium and tin, and that will raise from 8.3 Tesla, where they're now at, as far as the gravity, or I should say they rate it in Tesla as gravity, but it's really electromagnetism of 8.3. To give you some perspective, the Earth is about 0.6 Tesla. They're already operating at 8.3 Tesla. They're going to jump up to between 20 and 30 Tesla with the new machine.
Oh, man. So I wonder what kind of havoc that would wreak on the magnetic field of the Earth, because we already know that CERN, in its present form, if there's a coronal mass ejection or a solar flare on its way in, CERN has to shut down the beams because of the disruption to the magnetic field. So I wonder how much of an actual disruption it would be if it's 20 times more than that, Yeah,
be significant. I mean, we've talked about how they are going to basically lower the shields, to use a Star Trek phraseology there. The magnetosphere and the magnetopause are the shields from gamma rays and X-rays and accelerated particles from the cosmos and from the sun in particular. The magnets do reach out, so to speak, and change the morphology or the shape of those shields. And they do that not just because they have magnetic lines of force. One thing that we haven't talked about really in any depth is the fact that when you accelerate particles through a magnetic field, and that magnetic field holds the particles to a curved pathway, hence the main ring of the collider.
Luciferian agenda in general, okay, as it applies or in the context of current events. And somehow, I don't know where we took a left turn in the conversation and we started talking about just about the space and the planets, okay? And I said, it seems to me that there's a lot of emphasis placed on certain planets over others, but in particular Saturn. And I heard something about Saturn, and I did mention the cube as you referenced, but I went on kind of a different tangent, and that's when he stopped me and says, "Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about." And I said, "Yeah, you're exactly right. I don't know. I mean, because I was taken aback by any emphasis whatsoever by anyone in the intelligence venues, any one of them, talking about planets, for crying out loud, as some sort of an indicator or have any relevance to an agenda out there." I guess you get the feeling or get the idea on that.
So there you go, guys. I mean, it's not just us in the alternative media and on the woo-woo shows talking about black cubes. This really is highly relevant. Look at Mecca, the big black cobblestone over there, big black cube. Tony, this thing definitely is very, very relevant to those who have this knowledge.
It is, and it's their worship of Saturn as the primordial sun. And this goes back to their belief in the mythos of the golden age of Kronos, in which Mars, Earth, and Saturn were conjoined within a plasma envelope and traveled through the cosmos together, and then were entrained by the electromagnetic gravity, the electromagnetic attraction, not a gravity attraction, of the sun on Saturn, Earth, and Mars, and bringing them into close proximity of Earth itself. And this is reflected, as we often cite, in the research done by the scientists at the Thunderbolts Project. So people can go and look at that for more information. But in a nutshell, the reason they worship Saturn and the cube in particular is because they believe that that is where man started, where man lived in a previous Garden of Eden sort of environment, if you will, the golden age of Kronos being Saturn. So they are trying to recreate this golden age through all of this technology that we've been talking about for years now, in particular the Large Hadron Collider, otherwise known as the Very High Energy Electron-Proton Collider. That's what it's known in the physics community as. It's not really referred to as the LHC anymore, but I'll let you jump in there.
Well, I'm going to bring Joe in here at this point because, Joe, we're talking about this golden age. Yeah. And the more I'm starting to look into all of this, I mean, I thought Adam and Eve, that was the start of all of it. But I'm starting to appreciate now there was a whole heck lot more going on way before that, maybe 2-3 times. Who knows how many kind of startups we've had, Joe, but I'd like you to talk to that because you know more about that.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, we have the watered down version. Of course, I look at the Bible as one of many different sources. And your guest last night, man, I look forward to him coming on in 2 weeks. That's wonderful. If you look at the historical record across the world, and we'll just use Noah for an example, because the story of Noah is a common theme throughout all of the history of all of these ancient civilizations. Whether you go to South America, you hear Noah. It's by a different name, but it's Noah. You go over to China, it's Noah, and it's the same thing. You know, if you look in the Sumerian kings list and everything else, there's, you know, all of this stuff is all talked about. And so you wonder, well, how did that happen? How could that be?
Well, Joe, even last night, to add to that, during the break, we were talking to the guest, and he was telling us that Noah even turns up in the Quran.
Absolutely. And you have to read everything in its totality. It takes a lot of time, you know, and that's one of the things that I've done is I don't look. Well, the Bible's a historical document, and that's great, but it's so much more than that. To me, it's a communication medium. It really is. If you know how to use it, what happens is it ends up talking to you. That's the way God speaks to you. If you really connect with that book, it'll actually start talking to you and guiding you places.
Radiating out at 90 degrees from the ring itself in all directions are what are known as synchrotron energies. Those are gamma rays and X-rays. These also impact the magnetosphere. So it is not just a matter of the magnetic lines of force generated by the magnets, but also gamma rays and X-rays that will be produced by the machine that will also affect our shields. So you have the shields, in effect, being bombarded from without and from within, and they're not going to stand up, but that's deliberate, and we can touch on why it's deliberate if you want.
And, you know, just before that, there's so many different things going on at CERN because they've got the cloud experiment as well. And they're basically creating clouds in a chamber. And then, like Tony says there, these synchrotron energies, gamma rays and X-rays, what they do is they filter them off through a beam. They come into the cloud, and they're basically mapping and simulating what cosmic energy does to chemtrails, in my opinion. But Tony, I'll get you to add on to that, because that's where they use some of these energies that they produce, right?
Yeah, it does tie into the chemtrails. They want to make sure that they are saturating the atmosphere with enough of their aluminum particles in particular, but also there's barium and strontium and lithium and another host of particles and elements that they're putting into the atmosphere. The big part of that is, you know, Project Bluebeam, but the even bigger part of that is that they are trying to terraform the planet, and they're trying to change the atmosphere.
And this all ties back into last night's guest, Tony, because he was talking about the Nephilim and how basically their energies, their spirits, they're captured right now in the abyss. And when we're talking about geoengineering the planet and things like that, it's for these very entities, I imagine, one day, very soon, coming back and roaming around here. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I do. It's for a new race of beings. That's the whole purpose of this. It's not just for the Nephilim, be they, normal size, 6 foot or 8 foot, whatever, but also for the hybrid race that they're creating, the transhumanist movement and all of that. So we have a mixture of the Nephilim returning as well as human beings, whoever's going to be left here, being changed radically as well. So we have a lot going on. One of the other aspects to changing the shields, the shape or the integrity of the shields, is to, as we have discussed many times, is reaching out to Saturn electrically with the Large Hadron Collider, the reconnecting of the two planets. In fact, it's kind of a misnomer to say reconnecting. It's an enhancement of the existing electrical connection between all the planets and the Earth and the Sun. They are enhancing that electrical connection between Saturn and the Earth with the LHC. That's one of the multi-layered agenda items that they're working with. They'll produce toroidal fields and torsion fields with this machine in the production and transmission of Birkeland currents to the southern pole of Saturn. And if you want to get ready for that black cube discussion, you can fit it in here or we can do it later.
I've got it right here. And we often talk about the black cube of Saturn. And I know some people out there think it's a bit metaphysical, bit out there, doesn't really hold much relevance. Well, I want you to listen to this next clip. It's just a couple of minutes long and see what you make of this.
Well, thank you, guys. I'll just address Doug Hagman as Mr. Hagman to keep it clear. You remember you and I had a conversation, I think you reiterated in our last show, where you had said in a previous show concerning Saturn and the cube residing within it, the black cube of Saturn. And you disclosed to me that you had been in contact with an intelligence agency source who said to you, Doug, in relation to this cube, Doug, you don't know what you're talking about. And you had said, you're right, I don't know what I'm talking about. And his response to that was that everyone at the highest levels in the intelligence communities knows all about the black cube of Saturn and what it means. Now, I'm paraphrasing your words. Do you want to real quickly just kind of throw a comment back to me?
Well, yeah, and this was a discussion with somebody within one of the three-letter agencies, and we were talking about just the